across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very, very good morning. Welcome to the show. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. And whether you are listening on DAB Plus radio or you're on your smart speaker or you're watching on YouTube or you're on your connected device, it is absolutely fabulous to have your company today. Don't forget, if you miss anything of the show, you can go to my YouTube page. We call it the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Got no excuses for not being able to find it. Hit subscribe and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour in just a moment, we're going to be joined by the Conservative Party leader, Kemi Badenoch. We'll be talking to her about all things at home and abroad. We're also going to be discussing Donald Trump's promise to drop those tariff threats to the UK and Europe over Greenland, his U-turn on seizing Greenland by force. But what exactly is this deal over Greenland? We're also going to talk about kowtowing Keir Starmer and his visit to China. It's going to happen next week. And what a surprise, comes exactly a day after we found that announcement, after the announcement of the China mega embassy getting the go-ahead in London, despite all the security concerns. Also, the Prime Minister under mounting pressure to ban under-16s from social media following the Australian-style ban after the House of Lords backed an amendment in a vote last night. Looks like most MPs would support that too, so will he be forced into it? Well, we're going to be talking about all of that and many more stories with my guest in the studio, Jake Wallace-Simons, journalist and author. You'll know him as a regular friend of the show. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
But of course, first up, let's go straight to our top guest of the hour. And she is, of course, the Conservative Party leader, Kemi Badenoch MP. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. There is a heck of a lot to talk about today. Let's start with matters. Let's start with matters overseas, because I think you, like everyone else in our audience, will have been sort of caught in the whirlwind of what the heck is going on with Donald Trump and Greenland and all these threats, tariffs, the like. This whirlwind of diplomacy yesterday. Apparently a bit of Trump whispering going on. A Greenland deal. Do you think that what we know so far is a good deal for Europe, including Britain?
Well, it's actually hard to understand exactly what's been agreed. It looks like everyone's taking a breath. I think the good news for our country is that he is not putting those tariffs on. Those would have been a disaster. I speak to businesses all over the country, the bigger ones in particular that export to the US, saying they're losing business, and US payers are having US customers are having to pay loads more to buy our products. That's not good for the UK or the United States.
How would you be dealing with Donald Trump? Because there's a lot of talk that there's this special relationship between not just the UK and the US, but also between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump. A rather unlikely relationship, I think, looking at the two men from afar. But how would you have dealt with all of this?
Well, I think Donald Trump is someone who loves to do deals. And if he sees you as somebody who is someone he can do business with, it makes life easier. But what he actually really respects more than anything is strength. And countries that project strength, he respects. Countries that project weakness, he disrespects. And that's why I want to see our Prime Minister working in our national interest. When I met Donald Trump in September at the state banquet, he was talking about drilling in the North Sea, a view he and I share. We should be using our own energy resources, not relying on imports from other countries. And he said that if you stop losing your own energy resources, if you stop using your own energy resources, you become weak. So showing strength, strengthening your own country, spending much more money on defence and looking after UK PLC is what I would be doing. Was
he right, Donald Trump, when he said we've got problems in this country? No, we're going in that Europe is going in the wrong direction, including Britain, issues particularly with immigration and net zero. Was there anything he said there that wasn't completely true?
Well, Julia, you know my views on net zero. Even when we were in government, I was the one saying that this is the wrong idea. We need to tackle climate change. Bankrupting ourselves and deindustrializing, giving everything to China is not the way. So you know my views on that.
So he was right.
And on immigration, it was too high. Yeah, well,
so Donald Trump
I said that as well. Of course he's right. Net zero is not the... Well, Julia, if you're looking for a headline that Donald Trump was right, you can write that headline. You don't need me to say it. What I'm saying is that on net zero, we were going in the wrong direction. On immigration, it was too high. And I'm the leader of the party now. I'm acknowledging the mistakes of the past, but showing what the future is going to be. I heard you talking with Jeremy about the Convention on Human Rights. You know, we're now leaving the Convention on Human Rights if Conservatives come to government. We will have a proper human rights framework that works in our national interest and looks after people, rather than one that lets people come here from all over the world and stay here, get benefits, and impossible to deport them. That's not what we want to see.
Well, you mentioned the European Convention on Human Rights there, and that ties into this extraordinary vote yesterday, the Troubles Bill by the government, which is basically removing the conditional immunity that veterans who fought in Northern Ireland have had from prosecution. Senior figures in the SAS, veterans said, look, this could risk lives. It's an absolute slap in the face for those who did fight there. You've expressed concerns about how much this could damage soldiers in the here and the now. What is your big concern about this?
It's more than a concern, Julia. I'm absolutely appalled. This will be a disaster. I met with a large group of veterans just yesterday. It isn't just the veterans who are upset and worried about this. It's serving soldiers. Young people will not join the army if they think that they're going to be hounded through the courts. We have elderly people being hounded through the courts. We put in legislation to protect our veterans. Keir Starmer is standing against them. And we had a vote yesterday to protect them. Conservatives voted to protect veterans. Keir Starmer, Labour, voted against. Nigel Farage didn't vote. Rob Jenrick didn't vote. The Conservative Party is the only party that is fighting for our veterans. We cannot have people given orders by politicians, follow those orders, and then 30, 40 years later, they end up in the dock, and no one asks who was it that gave you the order. The British Army saves lives, and our troops who are stationed in Northern Ireland were there to protect people and to save lives, and I want to make sure that we do right by all of our soldiers, all of our veterans, whether they're serving or will serve or have served. I want them to know that the Conservative Party has got their back.
Well, again, let's talk about defence. And you mentioned earlier that Donald Trump, respects countries that are strong. Right now, we sort of, we talk the talk, but we don't really walk the walk, do we? And one of the interesting points that a lot of people were making about Greenland, interestingly, was, actually, the Danes or even the European Union can't defend Greenland. We're not really right now able to completely defend Ukraine on our own without American help. Do we need to spend more on defence? You've committed to spending more, but let's face it, every former defence chief we've had, and even the current ones, are saying we need way more money spent than even you and Farage and others are suggesting. We're talking about minimum 5% of GDP right now, today, and none of that money being spent on paying Mauritius for the Chagos Islands or anything like that, being spent on hardware and on fighting forces. Would you be willing to do that, and where would you get the money from for that?
So one of the things that I've been talking about is how Labour is all about welfare. It's welfare versus weapons. We want to see the welfare budget cut, and we want to see that money going into areas that will grow the economy and on defence. That is a huge thing that needs to be done, otherwise none of it is going to work. Since 1985, defence spending went down pretty much every year until that war in Ukraine in 2022, when we started increasing it, because everybody thought that it was going to be peaceful times forever. The Cold War was won, we were spending the peace dividend, we've now spent it all. It's now time to tool up.
You say tool up, again, what would you commit to that would be realistically enough to mean that we could actually be a serious military force that could not just protect our allies, but also protect our own borders?
Well, so on the regulatory side, leaving the ECHR, we've got a borders plan as well, a removals force. We need to get people who are a danger to our internal security out. That is part of defence. We need to start spending 3% by the end of this Parliament. I know that there's some people talking about a lot more.
Anybody who knows anything about defence is talking about a heck of a lot more, and not by the end of this Parliament. Today.
So spending 5% today is not something that even the defence chiefs are saying. We're talking about 3% at the end of this parliament. We're on 2.5% right now. The fact is, we're not growing. Where is the money going to come from? This is not even just about public spending. We are borrowing. We are borrowing to pay welfare. We need to cut the deficit. We need to cut all this borrowing down, and that means cutting public spending. We are looking at a plan to get to 3% by the end of this parliament. That is the most ambitious plan. Labour's plan is 3% sometime around 2034. That's absolutely ridiculous. But we need to be realistic about where the money is coming from now. We have spent a lot of time living off the peace dividend of the past. It's time to focus on the future.
OK, and just on specific issues that have been in the news the last couple of days, would you veto the approval of the Chinese mega embassy just across the road from our studio right now? And would you veto the giving away of the Chagos Islands?
Yes and yes. We're calling that Chinese super embassy a spy hub. I mean, we're actually having to move cables away because of security concerns about spying. That's not something that should be allowed. And it doesn't matter that some people are saying it'll be fine, we'll be able to manage it. Do you remember Huawei? We had these same concerns with Huawei, and the security analysis was that it would probably be fine. We ended up having, but that was based on the advice. It's not politicians who do the. But this is what I'm talking about. It's the security advice. David Cameron is not a security analyst. We get advice from the security services, and they tell us this is what we think you should do. Now I'm saying we should take a political decision not to do it. That sometimes even the security advice ends up being wrong in hindsight. We took that advice. We ended up having to strip out Huawei from our infrastructure. Keir Starmer is now saying, oh, well, the advice says this. I am saying that it's time for politicians to bring the politics into it, think about the risk, take the politically right decision, not just the advice that looks fine today but will be out of date tomorrow.
Would you be visiting China next week, as the Prime Minister is doing?
Not until we resolve the issues around the case of Chinese spies in Parliament. Remember the case of the alleged spies. That's something that should have been seen through. China, as our security services have said, attacks our country in all sorts of ways, cybersecurity and so on. We've seen many companies suffer from that. There's a lot of intellectual property theft. It is a country we trade a lot with, but they have been an economic threat. They have been a threat to us. We need to make sure that we deal with those issues before we pretend everything is fine.
Okay.
And, on Chagos as well, that is a deal that benefits China, paying Mauritius £35 billion. That's money that should go into real defence to keep, to keep territory we already own, but surrender the sovereignty of it. That's completely wrong.
OK, let's talk about things closer to home.
Keep a base on territory you already own.
Well, indeed. A vote last night by the House of Lords, an amendment to a schools bill going through Parliament. The Lords have voted for a ban on social media for all under 16s. Lots of pressure being put on the Prime Minister. He's already said he's going to open a consultation on that this week, following the Australian ban on the very same thing brought in December. Would you support a social media ban for under 16s?
Julia, that is my policy. I've been banging on about it for ages, and that was a Conservative amendment. It wasn't just a Lord's amendment. Okay. It was a Conservative amendment. Lord Nash put that down. That is something we want to see. I think we'll get another U-turn from Keir Starmer, but I was absolutely delighted that we won that vote. Those platforms are designed to be addictive. They're for adults, not for children. Companies should not be profiting from children's distraction or anxiety.
I agree with all of that. I've got now an adult child. You've got 3 children under 16. But you opposed compulsory digital ID because, we don't want people. We're not a papers, please society. We don't want people having to constantly identify themselves as adults. How do we identify who children are on social media or on their phones unless people can identify that they're an adult? In which case, you've basically got, because people are on social media, pretty much everybody, compulsory ID. So
there are. I'm completely opposed to mandatory digital ID. You're right, but there are other ways, and this is one of the things that we need to now start talking about. There's facial recognition, where the data is not kept before you set up the account. Looking at the face of the person who is setting it up is one option. We should explore that. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but things have moved on from the technology of even 5 years ago, let alone 10, 20 years ago.
But that doesn't allow anonymity.
The fact is this.
What about Iranian protesters who want to get their message out about the slaughter on the streets of Iran? How would they be able to do that if they had to identify themselves?
Julia, I'm interested in British children. I'm interested in British children and keeping them safe. I had a cousin who killed himself because he was spending a lot of time on social media and got radicalized and saw things and started believing things that were not true. This is a very serious issue. There's always a reason why we shouldn't do certain things, but I believe that this is the right thing. Social media should be for adults. Iranian protesters are not children. They are adults, and there will be ways. I think we should look very carefully to make sure that we get that balance right. What I want is freedom for adults, protection for children.
But you can't have freedom for adults, protection for children, unless you can identify who is who. So if you're under the age of 25, you go in a supermarket, you want to buy alcohol, not under the age of 18, under the age of 25, you are likely to be asked for ID to prove your age. Are we not, by the back door, going to be opening the way for governments to decide these things? I agree with you. I don't want kids on social media under 16. But I also think we've got a lot of power. Governments around the West could be pressuring these companies to have algorithms that don't direct. I think these things are dangerous for adults as well as children. Anorexia and suicide and goodness knows what else. Extremism, Andrew Tate, you name it.
But Julia, here's the thing. If we're worried about protecting anonymity, let me tell you now. Those social media companies know everything about us. TikTok knows more about the children in the UK, that's a Chinese company, than anything the government has ever done. That, for me, is a real problem. In 10, 20 years' time, if we don't do this, China is going to know everything about our young people as adults, who their friends are, what they like, while we've been sitting twiddling our thumbs, having arguments about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. Let's get serious.
We could just ban TikTok.
Well, yes, but it's not the only social media platform.
Okay, all right, but that's the one owned by the Chinese. Let's talk about just party affairs. You've said, when anyone asks you about Robert Jenrick, and he was in the studio only about an hour ago talking to my colleague Jeremy Carr, you always say, no, Robert Jenrick is Farage's problem now. He's not my problem. You got rid of him. How much of a problem was Robert Jenrick to you on a day-to-day basis while he was still in your shadow cabinet?
Well, it's become clear that actually he was spending his time undermining the party rather than supporting the party. He would not use the word Conservatives. He had left the team, really, and what I'm trying to show is that the party is about public service, not self-service. If you're here just because you want to be on telly, this is not the party for you. We need people who are going to be focused on making people's lives better with better policy, better arguments, getting out there, campaigning.
OK. Are you glad to be shot of him?
Well, I am happy that my team is more united than ever. I have a great new Shadow Justice Secretary in Nick Timothy, somebody who was scoring runs for the party, managed to get the West Midlands police officer gone. That was all Nick. I'm really proud of what he did. That's the kind of thing that I want to see my frontbenchers doing.
But you said you didn't think there'd be any, last week there wouldn't be any more defections, and you immediately had Andrew Rossendale, again, another frontbencher, defecting.
I said there would be no defections from the Shadow Cabinet. People are twisting my words.
Okay.
I was asked, will there be defections for the Shadow Cabinet? And I said, absolutely
and
not.
And you said this week, if you're going to go now, are you expecting anyone else to announce before the weekend?
Well, I don't know. People know what's in their hearts, but I am telling people this is what I'm doing with the party. We are a party of the centre-right. We're on the right. If you don't want to go that direction, then you should leave. If you're here for yourself or because you want to be on telly or you just want to be in whichever party is polling highest, then you need to go as well. Okay. I want people to know that this is a serious party focused on the needs of the public.
Okay. I know we haven't got much time left. I just want to ask you, so Jacob Rees-Mogg was on my show yesterday talking about the right to unite and saying that, look, if there is no majority for either party, Reform or the Tories at the next election, and we know, look, through the next 3 years is a long time in politics, the right to basically say, look, we're not going to form a pact, we're not going to say we're going to go into coalition, our aim is a majority. If, however, we don't get one, in a bid to stop these so-called, but definitely not progressives, Labour, Lib Dems, Greens and others forming a coalition government, we will work, we will have a coalition with Reform, and Reform would have a coalition with you. That would be the right thing for the centre-right, wouldn't it?
Well, we are the party of the centre-right. I mean, Mr. Jenrick was on your show this morning saying that he wanted Labour MPs to join Reform. That's not uniting the right. He's asking the left to join Reform because they are a populist party. They're telling everybody, whether they're left or right, whatever it is they want to hear. And what I'm saying is that we need people who are authentic Conservatives. Reform have said that their ambition is to destroy the Conservative Party. Nigel Farage has said it. A lot of his acolytes have said it. You know, they are a one-man band trying to destroy the Conservative Party because they're angry about goodness knows what from the past. I don't have time for that. All of this psychodrama, enough. I want people to know what the Conservative Party is offering. This is our offer at the election, and we hope that the public will believe that we are the only credible alternative to Labour.
But you've got so-called authentic Conservatives in your party who think the Brexit was the wrong thing. They try to fight against the outcome of a democratic vote, the biggest in British history, and they think that we shouldn't have national sovereignty. A lot of them, I mean, don't even think that we should have limits on immigration, for goodness. They want, you know, I mean, are they true Conservatives? Are they authentic Conservatives?
Julia, remember that Boris Johnson removed those people who didn't want Brexit and who were trying to stop it from the party back in 2019. I'm very proud of Conservative MPs. I have a great team. We are one family. Yes, sometimes we have differing views. We are not a dictatorship, but we're also not a one-man band. That's Reform. We are a party where you can have views, but I'm the leader and I'm the one who sets the policy, and I think people know where I stand.
Just finally, on an issue I know it's close to your heart and my heart, which is where women's rights, when they are trampled on by so-called trans rights. The government appears still to not have accepted the Supreme Court ruling last April that made it very clear what the law was regarding to single-sex spaces. You were Equalities Minister when under the Conservatives in power. Do you think that Keir Starmer still believes that only 99.9% of women don't have a penis, in which case 0.1%, roughly 30,000 of us, do?
Yes, the fact that he even said that shows what an odd man he is. To be honest, I don't think he knows what he believes. He's all over the place. He's like a plastic bag blowing in the wind. Wherever the wind takes him, that's where he goes. The Conservative Party has been very clear that biological sex is the only definition of sex that is relevant for the Equality Act. The Supreme Court has upheld that. But it's not just Labour that's doing this. You know, in Scotland as well, the SNP doing a lot of nonsense. I was up there last week speaking to Sandy Peggy. You know, we had the success of the Jennifer Millay case. It's mostly nurses, actually, in the NHS who seem to be bearing the brunt of this. There's a problem in the NHS, and Claire Coutinho, who's the Shadow Minister for Equalities, is doing a lot of work on that to bring this out into the open. OK, we've covered a lot of ground. Now I have to let you go. Kemi Badenoch, great to have you on the show. Hope you'll come back more often and talk to our audience. I'm sure they'd like to hear more from you. Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch, thank you indeed for joining us. 10:24 is the time. Love to hear your thoughts on what she had to say. Love to hear your thoughts on all the big stories. I've not put out a question today. Normally I read like a specific question. I'd like to hear from you as well. You usually know the phone lines are always open for you to talk about whatever you want. But there is so much around today, whether it's the Troubles Bill and the betrayal of veterans, whether it's what's going on with Greenland, the Board of Peace ceremony that Donald Trump is holding right now at Davos, whether it is a social media ban for under 16s. You name it, I want to hear from you. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Your text costs one standard network rate message. Do get your calls in. Up next, going to talk to journalist and author Jake Wallace-Simons joining us in the studio. This is Talk.
Didn't vote on it last night, mate. No, in Parliament there's something called being slipped, which is where you pre-agree with the whips that you got something else and you can't do it. The last Conservative government took a very long time to pass a bill which granted a degree of immunity to the brave men who fought in the period of the Troubles, so they didn't have to spend the last days of their lives being hauled through the courts or waiting for a letter to drop on their doormat, telling them that they were now in danger. And the Labour government, for reasons I think none of us can fathom, decided to unwind that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Yet again, another topsy-turvy show, and frankly, let's face it, a topsy-turvy world. We've just been speaking to Kemi Badenoch. Would you like to say that Jake Wallace-Simons, journalist and author, joins us today for the whole show? So lovely to have you in the studio, normally down the line. Yeah. Great to have you here. Just first of all, reactions to what Kemi Badenoch had to say, I mean, on international affairs, because you've been a foreign affairs journalist for many, many years. I mean, everything just, and we've got, right now, Donald Trump holding the Board of Peace ceremony over Gaza. You know, I've talked so many times about Gaza and Israel. Seems to now be some sort of alternative, United Nations, I don't know, a new League of Nations, but, we're not joining it, the French aren't joining it. I'm not quite sure why he wants Vladimir Putin on a Board of Peace. Not sure that makes sense. This climb down over Greenland, I mean, what do you make of what's going on, and indeed what Kemi Badenoch had to say about all of it?
Well, there's just a huge swirl of events all coming at us at once, and Donald Trump seems to be at the centre of the storm. I mean, Greenland, for a start, is just, to say it's unprecedented, people use that word a lot with Donald Trump. Greenland, It really is. I mean, a NATO ally behaving towards them with such belligerence, and yet he seems to have sort of climbed down in a way. He's got the deal which he could have got much more easily, really, without shaking it up.
And since 1951, he's had the right to put bases on, but I think the idea is now that the bases will be treated like our British bases in Cyprus, as basically US territory.
Actually owning the territory. And the big sort of elephant in the room is the rare earth metals. Greenland has the eighth biggest deposit.
But apparently a very long way down in ice, yes.
Yeah, I mean, he called it Iceland a few times. He called it a big hunk of ice, big beautiful hunk of ice, or whatever it was.
I've got to be honest, I'm not entirely sure that he absolutely knows where it is. Do you remember when he was being his big? Do you remember when he did his big stuff about the deal over Gaza, and he was praising Qatar. Qatar, they're living with this. They've got the guns on their the borders, and you think, have you got a map of the Middle East? Qatar's nowhere sodding near Israel and Gaza.
Yeah, you just felt the Icelandic people just going, my God, does he actually mean us?
Yes.
In reality. He also called Azerbaijan Azerbaijan, which was quite a funny moment.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on. I think the thing is that you take a step back of the dust settles on the Greenland issue.
Everyone breathes.
Everyone breathes. But what he has done is shaken up the European defence complacency once again. He obviously feels that even now, after so many shocks to the system from the White House, they're still resting on their laurels. They're still not committing enough money to their defence.
Do you think that was his aim? I don't believe for a moment that was his aim.
Well,
He's giving us a little short, sharp
who knows what his aim was? I mean, that's certainly part of the mix. I think it's a whole combination of different instincts in Trump. It's all animal instincts. It's all about strength, as Kemi was saying. It's all about strength. It's all about projection of strength. It's all about power and deals. And the Europeans, that's not how we think.
No, but this is the thing. He's been making the point, and quite accurately, that if they want Greenland, I mean, it's 57,000 people and a bunch of huskies, I imagine, in some nice, pretty painted houses. It looks utterly grim. By the way, one of these people don't talk about it. For years, it's been in the news. Greenland, I mean, again, it's one of those countries that has a massively high suicide rate, as many in the Arctic Circle do, but also a huge, I mean, this is the most horrific thing, a huge rate of child abuse. 40% of young people in Greenland have been victims of child abuse. This is not a happy country. There's talk now of sort of, $1 million per inhabitant to say, can we have you? I've been saying for weeks, this is a good offer. If I lived in a hellhole like that and someone said, $1 million, you could be an American citizen, thank you very much, I'll take my check, please.
Well, what I want to know is it possible to, as a Briton, to go and live in Greenland
and then take the money? Yeah, absolutely. Please. But this is the thing. When he says that we could just take. Of course they can. And all this sabre rattling from the EU. Oh, bazooka, trade bazooka. Yeah, okay. You've got your trade bazooka. You could hit tech companies. But at the end of the day, there's absolutely sod all that the Europeans can realistically militarily do about it. In the same way, we're not actually able to fully protect Ukraine without America's help. Wake-up call.
Well, we can't even protect ourselves, frankly. I mean, I think that's really the sort of the theme that runs through all these different stories is European weakness and American strength. I mean, in his speech in Davos, Trump took Emmanuel Macron as a particular whipping boy, mocking his sunglasses.
Oh, fair enough, though.
Putting on his French accent and sort of just totally taking the mickey out of him consistently. He also had a go at Starmer and how he's got to get control of our country, again, totally fairly, on net zero, on other things. And when it came to the Board of Peace, when there was objections about having Putin, Qatar, Turkey, China on that board, so-called, of peace, Trump said, well, what am I going to have, a load of babies? So he sees the Europeans and Britain as babies. And frankly, we've given him reason to see us like that because of our pathetic spending on defence.
But he takes countries like Egypt seriously, and that's bizarre. But I mean, putting Vladimir Putin... Apparently Vladimir Putin hasn't said yes, but putting Vladimir Putin on the Board of Peace, I mean, is he taking the mick? I think he is taking. I mean, Vladimir Putin takes the mick all the time. I mean, there's stronger language I'd like to use, but I can't
likewise,
on there.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's just sitting there. He and Xi Jinping right now, for the last week, for the last year, they have just been laughing at us.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely right. I think that, I mean, the thing is, though, that the Board of Peace is a crazy idea. I mean, it's a good idea, but then to have all these bad actors who have different agendas to the democracies on the Board of Peace is bizarre. And yet I still wonder whether, I mean, this seems like the only time Starmer's been in favour of Brexit, of leaving an international institution, turning up the possibility of influencing it from the inside, which we were supposed to be doing in the EU. He's left it. I wonder whether he's leaving himself out of the next step of history on the outside in a failing UN, which, you know, protested far more loudly about Gaza than about Iran recently, thus showing, you know, displaying its prejudices to the world. The UN is failing in part of the past. Is the Board of the Peace the future? No. I don't know. But certainly the UK is going to be out of the conversation.
Yeah, I've long been in favour of us sort of, like, you know, ditching the UN or play along with it while you think, but it's now basically a tool of the Chinese and the Russians. I don't think something should be legal or illegal depending on what the Chinese or the Russians think about it, which is effectively what happens with the UN. They've got all these banana republics in their pockets and they're using them in votes against us, using them on, you know, the ICJ of the Chagos. They're using them, you know, to batter Israel. This is a busted flush.
It is.
I'm in favour of like a new League of Nations, of democratic nations.
Absolutely.
Only a democrat. If you are not you don't have a proper free democracy. I don't give two hoots what your opinion is on anything.
You're not equal. If you're not a democracy,
you're not equal.
You don't deserve to be in the room in the same way.
But we're ruled by people across most of the Western world who are moral relativists. They think that, well, you know, it's like, oh, Maduro in Venezuela, it's a nation state. He's a drug lord, criminal murderer.
I mean,
I couldn't
Iran
give two hoots about him being arrested.
Iran was chairing the Human Rights Council in the
Saudi Arabia was chairing the Women's Rights Council. I mean,
hilarious.
come on.
But the funny thing about the Board of Peace, though, before we move on from that topic, is that you can join for 3 years upon invitation. You can upgrade your membership for $1 billion to a lifetime. So you get a little tick. You pay by credit card, and now you're a lifetime member. It's hilarious.
Brilliant. Oh, well, Tony Blair's going to be on it. He's got a spare billion, hasn't he? There's loads more I want to talk about, including stuff back at home, which really, really matters. The Troubles Bill, but also social media ban for under 16s. Again, I'm in favour of that in theory. And yet, in practice, there are, as I put to Kemi Badenoch, there are a hell of a lot of issues. We could pave the way to a lot more trouble for the rest of us. Whenever people talk about, we're doing this to keep people safe. Yeah, we've heard that for quite a few years. How's that been working out for us, folks? We're going to talk about that up next. Going to take your calls. As I said, the phone lines are open. Give us a call. Whatever you want to talk about, you can get on air. 0344, well, within reason. 0344 499. I don't want to make that mistake. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:37 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is the home of common sense. Lots of common sense from my guest joining me in the studio, journalist and author Jake Wallace-Simons. Lots of common sense, I imagine, on the phone lines from you as well. Let's get straight to your phone calls. I've left the phone lines open on all the big topics. Some of them we, of course, discussed with Kemi Badenoch, the Tory party leader, a few moments ago. Stuart is on the line in Wigan. Stuart, what do you want to have your say on?
Well, I've just listened to your conversation with Kemi Badenoch. Now, I'm not a Kemi Badenoch hater. I'm not a Conservative hater. I'm a Reform voter. And as far as I'm concerned, the next time Labour will be in, we'll be living on Mars. Because they are dead now.
I hope so.
But the conversation about the defence fund and this and the other, you know, it's absolutely ridiculous. We should be up to 5% now, at least.
They've all got their heads in the sand on this. They really do.
It's quite simple as far as I'm concerned. Let's stop paying for immigrants.
Yep.
Stop the foreign aid.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, this country's on its floor. It's on its backside, this country. Stop foreign aid. Why are we sending foreign aid to China, the second richest country in the world?
It has been cut down a lot. But let's not pay Mauritius for the Chagos Islands, which we already own. The other thing is get all these young people off welfare.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I've worked every day since I left school. I'm 57 now, and I'm still working 50, 60 hours a week. But I totally agree with that. But, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, Chagos started when they were in. Don't get me wrong.
Yep.
I know Labour, it's their baby, you know what I mean? But that's entirely rubbish. I mean, let's go back to when Conservatives were in. They weren't thinking about us when they gave Ireland away to Europe. Do you know what I mean? And like I say, I think Conservatives will be in a lot sooner than Labour will ever be, because I don't think people will ever forget what Labour's done to us. They're traitors.
Very interesting.
Every single one of them.
Very interesting. I said at the time, I remember lots of Tories were saying to me, oh, you know, if people don't vote Tory, if they don't vote, they vote for reform instead, you're going to get a Labour government. And I remember saying, yeah, well, maybe, you need to be thrown out because you've betrayed people. You didn't just do what you said you'd do. You did the exact opposite of it on the immigration tax and goodness knows what else, and, you know, that madness. I said, but also, maybe the country needs a little dose of a Labour government. Just, you know, here's your reality check, you know, where we were told, were we not, a year and a half ago, the grown-ups are back in the room. Well, how's that working out? Let's go to Mike, who's in Plymouth. He's given us a call as well on 0344 499 1000. Mike, you want to talk about what Kemi Badenoch had to say? What do you want to say?
Thanks, Julia. Yeah, I really agreed with Kemi. I like her a lot. I found it very difficult to disagree with a lot of what she says. In fact, most of what she says. But like a lot of ex-Conservative voters, and I'm 35 years in the Royal Navy, I'm right of centre normally, and historically always been a Tory voter. But after the lockdown debacle, which I will never forgive the Tories for.
Would have been worse under Labour. They were begging for more lockdowns.
100% agree with that as well. Yeah, and we'd still be in a lockdown now. I think it was Labour.
Oh, God, yeah.
But the Tories do need a kick in at the polls, I'm afraid, for that. And I think what is probably going to be quite common with Conservative voters is they're going to vote for reform at the next general election, see how it goes, and then potentially go back. Yeah. And if somebody like Kemi is there, I struggle to think of a leader since Thatcher who I've been so impressed with, but I simply can't vote for her because of the legacy of the Tories over the last 14 years.
So it's her you like, what she says you like, the policies, you kind of just don't trust the rest of the Tory party?
Correct. I mean, they've stripped out people now. I mean, the Ken Clarks and the Rory Stewarts and people like that have found, political affiliations elsewhere now, yeah. So it's more of one voice, the Tory party, and she is definitely rebuilding it brick by brick. But, you know, as I say, as a Tory voter, down-the-wall Tory voter, I'll be voting reform, and nothing will dissuade me from that because of the last 14 years of ineptitude.
And you say you're a veteran. What do you make of this Troubles Bill, which, you know, Kemi Badenoch has said quite clearly she believes will cost lives in the present and in the future, because basically that sort of partial immunity, conditional immunity, which soldiers had who fought in Northern Ireland, that will be gone. on, we're told by the government, because the European Convention on Human Rights, which seems to be the excuse for everything, used to just be the EU for everything. Now it's the European Convention on Human Rights. And she's saying, look, this is going to impact people on the battlefield, in the future, which say, hold on a minute, I need to do something to save someone's life in a split-second decision. Do I want to do it because I'm going to face prosecution for murder in years to come? And that this would actually have an impact. As a veteran yourself, what do you make of those comments?
Well, I'm still actually serving, believe it or not,
Oh,
after
right.
35 years. But what I think is that young kids that are joining now don't really think about things like that. They don't look like headlines like that. Obviously, It becomes a salient point when you're either involved in those kind of things or as you get older. I just think it's it's a sign of the times, isn't it? That we chase after our veterans in this way, whilst actually the IRA and people that were on the other side of the fight, if you like, seem to go away scot-free. So there's a deep injustice there for me. But it's just quite sad the way that that's going. But I do like her stance on that. Again, Kemi, thumbs up. I'm particularly. Particularly impressed by her, really.
Okay, well, there you are then. Kemi Badenoch, if you're still listening. Mike's a fan, but still not quite sure about the vote, which is really interesting. Mike in Plymouth, thank you very much indeed. Jake Wallace-Simons, I want to come on to the Troubles, talk that with you, but it's interesting how many people, I like Kemi Badenoch, like the cut of her jib, but I don't trust the party anymore. And as I put it, there are still a hell of a lot of people she considers, to be, true Tories, genuine Tories in the party. But in fact, they'd be better off with a yellow rosette on them, or frankly, a green rosette.
Yeah, I mean, people like Mike obviously gave the Tories a kicking in the last election, the kicking of a generation, but they still haven't got the anger out of their system and want to give it to them again. And yet there's probably a few more years until the next general election, and Kemi, having won his heart in terms of her own leadership, now has to rebuild the party and make it a convincing proposition. Nick Timothy replacing Robert Jenrick is a brilliant move.
Well, you've been doing a lot of work with him, I know, over the Maccabi Tel Aviv case.
Absolutely. He's
a great
emerged
operator.
as an absolute hero, stalwart in the Tory party. She needs to just start to bring more coherence to the party, make it more of a convincing right-wing option. And in a couple of years' time, I wouldn't be surprised if Mike finds his pencil wavering over the reform box.
On the specifics of the Troubles bill, talk us through this, because this is a very, very big issue. I know Jeremy Carl, loads of calls, and say your calls are all still welcome on that subject. Lots and lots of veterans just tearing their hair out over this bill. And once again, it's the human rights lawyers who've decided policy. Talk us through what it means.
I mean, it's just infuriating. I mean, there was a protection in place for our veterans against private prosecutions. That's now being removed by Labour because of the ECHR. But I think that really it's
incompatible with individual human rights.
Yes, something like that. But it goes against every sense of common morality that we're going to be pursuing our veterans in favour of the IRA because the ECHR says so. But to me,
by the way, we're not talking about a soldier who's committed a clear crime. Just gone out of their way and just, whilst serving as a soldier and committed a crime, rape or murder or something. We are talking about in the course of their work, directing under orders, in a firefight, acting with their, their best, in all good conscience, under orders, and then still facing private prosecution.
We've got our own,
decades later.
Yeah, we've got our own laws already. We've got laws of court-martial. Murder is obviously illegal, as is rape and theft and all the rest of it. We've got those laws. We enforce those laws. Britain invented many of those laws. We don't need the ECHR to come and make us go beyond that in order to really damage the morale of our armed forces and embolden our enemies. And to me, it's really part of the Labour worldview, where they give a kicking to our armed forces, give a kicking to the farmers, give a kicking to the fishermen, give a kicking to the publicans, give a kicking to all the people who represent what makes Britain Britain, and the side that they're on is on international law, ECHR. It's sort of metropolitan bubble. It's sneering
sort of really good. So I always say to people, I always think, oh God, I got up early for work or this or that. Better than having a proper job. I've done proper jobs. You actually have to get up. You're on your feet all day. You're doing manual labour. It's hard work. The disdain and the contempt with which the likes of Keir Starmer and many of his cabinet seem to have for the men and women who do a proper sodding day's work, rather than like me sitting at a desk. Their contempt is, as opposed to the lanyard club, class who they worship and adore. You can feel it. It's in the air. You can feel it.
Labour's called Labour because it's supposed to represent the people doing the labouring.
Yeah.
The people doing the work. The people
who make Britain work.
And yet
the ones who weren't allowed to go under lockdown. The ones who actually had to still do their job so the country functioned.
And the ones
while everyone sat there with their laptops.
And the ones who, if we were to ever go to war, would be serving our country in uniform on the front lines.
Thank you.
Protecting Keir Starmer and his cronies in their comfy Islington flats.
Absolutely.
And it's those people, you know, I think of all the groups I've mentioned, farmers and publicans and so on, it's the armed forces that really is the worst treatment of all, because we know the state of our defence spending, we know the parlous state of our national security under Labour, not just armed forces, but also with the Chinese and the Iranians and so on. The army, he's deliberately sapping the morale out of the army.
Also, I mean, the pay is shocking. It's below, you know, shop workers. You know, the living conditions not good enough for illegal immigrants being housed there, but is good enough for our veterans, our serving soldiers in their families. It's just extraordinary. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000, and your thoughts on this social media ban for children at school under 16. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call and let us know what you think. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Why are our politicians crucifying our veterans? I am so angry. I am so furious. None of them have ever carried a rifle. What's next? Afghan? Iraq? Hey? No shame on these people. Disgrace.
These are men and women who put their lives on the line for our country, and we've got a government who thinks it would be a good idea to prosecute them. This is the same party that's gladly going to sit around the table with Jerry Adams and IRA leaders who blew to smithereens people's lives, their homes and their businesses for many, many years.
The UK on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:50 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk about the prospect of a social media ban. Backbench rebellion, actually, well, from Tory Lords in the House of Lords last night. The government's Children's and Schools Bill has could actually force Keir Starmer's hand on a ban on social media for under 16s. They voted to allow that. MPs are going to get another chance of voting on it. Looks like there's a majority across the House for that ban to come into place, even though the government's just announced a consultation in it following the Australian ban that began a month or so ago. Well, let's talk about this with Professor Tony Breslin. He's author of Lessons from Lockdown, and he's also a school and college governor. Very good morning to you, Tony.
Good morning, Julia. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. We've just been speaking to Kemi Badenoch on the show live, and she was saying, you know, this looks something that she's very much in favour of. She's got 3 children under 16 herself. Very strict rules in her home about what they can access, and she thinks that we need to bring this social media ban in for under 16s. Do you agree with her?
I'm not sure. I remain to be convinced. What I do think we need is much stronger regulation. We've got a kind of 3 critical things here. We've got a real crisis of parenting in a digital age, how we do it. I struggle with that as a parent. Secondly, we've got tech companies that are frankly out of control and are setting all the rules. And thirdly, we've got this fantastic technology that allows us to connect and engage and research and understand in ways we never have before. I'm not convinced that some kind of blanket ban is the right move. And I'm always worried about law made on the back of moral panic.
Yes.
Let's research it and do the right thing, which might be a ban, but let's make sure we're getting it right.
And this is the thing. Everyone was saying, well, we'll wait and see what happens in Australia. No, will youngsters get round it? Are there issues, as I raised with Kemi Badenoch, about, well, if you can identify that someone is a child, then by definition you have to identify that someone's an adult. Well, how would you do that unless they give their ID? And we've already had a big backlash to that over the issue of, accessing sort of adult services like pornography, people getting, and particularly youngsters, free VPNs. They're available for free, as well as the rather more, there's more other ones which you pay for, which perhaps give you a bit more protection. But youngsters have a way of getting around this stuff. They understand this stuff way more than most parents do. And we could just end up, again, this sort of creeping idea of safety for kids ends up being effectively controls on adults.
I think also it risks ignoring the multiple benefits that we can get from having the world at our fingertips. But we have to be aware of the costs as well. The costs that when a family goes out to dinner now, if they're lucky enough to be able to afford to do that, they sit in a restaurant and they're all on their phone.
Oh, it's utterly miserable. Genuinely, Jake Wallace-Simon's in the studio with me. We were just discussing that in the break. Yeah. It breaks my heart whenever I see that, because this is it. I think, schools that allow kids to have their phones in the classroom, if you get your phone out in the classroom, if you're not suspended for a week, your school is not doing their job properly. But the real problem is, again, I agree with you, you've got the algorithms from the tech companies. They can absolutely change those algorithms, and they should be changing those algorithms for adults as well as kids, but even more so for kids. But it's fundamentally, a lot of it is down to parenting. The parents who say, well, what can I do? I mean, my kid just is on their phone all the time and they use it at dinner. And I'm like, do you even hear yourself?
Yeah, I do. And what's worrying is I hear myself when I hear you say that. We are all battling with it.
No, that's not true. I never battled with it. It was never an issue. It was never even up for discussion. Wasn't allowed.
Okay, right.
I'm sorry, I'm a 1950s parent. It works.
Not at all. I'm still working at being a 70s one. Look.
Oh, that's the worst kind of parenting. Don't do that.
And schools, for instance, most schools now are doing a really good job on this, and they're working really hard, and most of them have managed to square the circle between banning the inappropriate use of phones during school hours and particularly during lesson hours, and actually saying to students, now get your phones out, we're going to go onto this site here.
No, I don't think they should ever get their phones out. I really don't.
You see, I've got a wall of books behind me, Julia. The truth is I hardly ever go to them now. I loved going to them, but I click a couple of keys here and I've got all of that. Now, in terms of education, if we're educating children for a digital age, we've got to prepare them for that.
True.
If we create just a cliff edge, so say we did a complete ban and say it was effective and say every parent managed to, completely enforce it. Let's just imagine that.
Yeah.
They would get to 16 and they would fall off the cliff.
But
and
that's
not
the
know
same
how to handle it at all.
But that's the same as that's the same as 16 you're allowed to have sex, and the day before you're 16 you're not. It's the same as you're allowed to legally, to have alcohol and cigarettes at the age of 18, but the day before you're not. All laws have. You're allowed to vote. You're not allowed to vote. These are cliff edge by definition.
I accept that. But actually, what we try and do in education, and I work with about 50 schools a year.
Yeah.
What we try and do is prepare young people for the cliff edges.
Yeah.
So actually we have to have, it should be a fantastic resource.
Yes.
That my kids are far more digitally able than I ever will be, right? It shouldn't be a threat. At the moment, to some degree it is. Look, I'm not against a ban. It may be the way we need to go, but we need to look at the evidence and we need to base our decisions on that. And I'm sure we can get this right, because frankly, we don't have a choice.
Yes, I think we're going to have to face up to something, as you're right. I mean, let's at least have a proper consultation and do some research, see what happens elsewhere. I want to ask you also, as someone who's involved with so many schools, these two stories today, I mean, again, heartbreaking. One in, children are starting school trying to swipe and tap books like phones because they've never had a book. I've read these stories before, where their kids start holding them upside down. They literally don't even know how to do it. They just no idea. But also, 1 in 4 kids that are starting school in reception classes, so they're 4 years old up to 5 years old, are still in nappies, according to a poll of teachers, because parents don't think toilet training is their job, but obviously think it's teachers' job. Both these stories just utterly baffle me. Well, what's going on?
Well, my wife was a primary school head teacher for many years, and I was chair of governors at a primary school federation, and I'm a trustee of a primary school MAT at the moment. We do have some of this. It is a bigger issue. I'm always going to say that the answer is education. I'm going to back to my first point about we've got a real crisis in parenting here, and we need to address that. And we need to be really clear in the education system about what we expect of parents. I don't think we're always clear enough, and I don't think politicians are clear enough.
But I don't think the parents needed to be told to toilet train their kids and teach them how to sit on a chair and follow instruction when I went to school.
But I agree. But look, I think all these things are intertwined. There have been various issues around the struggles of the traditional family in the modern age.
Oh, it's lazy-ass parenting. Let's call it what it is. They'd rather be doing this than spending time talking to their kids, teaching their kids, reading to their kids.
Isn't it? That's the connection. And certainly, you know, there was some research done some years ago now, about a decade ago, where the three of the largest universities got together and they discovered something that wasn't surprising to me at all. You might say it wasn't worth the money, but they actually were able to demonstrate that the biggest single impact on educational achievement, when you cut out class and ethnicity and disadvantage and everything else, was the presence of books in the home. Not even the reading of them, the physical presence of books in the home. Now, of course, in the digital age, everybody has one of these. I'm holding out. There we are. Everybody has one of those. Other brands are available. But do we get children enough to look with and interface with books enough? And how do we get books into homes and into parents?
But then the National Book Trust, I think they hand out books, but people say it's about poverty. Libraries offer free books. I mean, it's genuinely, it's painful. Oh, Tony, we could talk about this for so much longer. I'll come back on the show again soon. Tony Breslin's professor and school and college governor. Loads more. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, sorry for my language earlier, but I can't think of anything that makes me more angry than bad parenting. It's the root of everything that's... You want to know why people are on welfare? You want to know why the country's going to the dogs? You want to know about, like, you know, all these cultural problems? This is education, and this is about parenting first and foremost. This is such a crucial issue for our country. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. You want to talk about all the world affairs? You want to talk about troubles in Northern Ireland and betrayal of our veterans? You get in touch. I want to get your calls on air. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. More from Jake Wallace-Simons coming up. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you very much indeed for your company. If you missed the last hour, you missed a rip-roaring first hour. Don't forget, you can go to the YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Really easy to find. You've got no excuses not to find it. Hit subscribe. You never have to miss a thing. You can see what we've been doing in the last hour, including talking to Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative Party leader. And whether you are right now listening to us on DAB+ radio, or your smart speaker watching on YouTube, or your connected device, I mean, I don't know, the government and everyone's going to probably try and punish you because you're on some kind of social media. I'm pretty sure YouTube counts. You'll be told off, but not if you're listening to the radio, because that's okay. These are the same people who think that soap operas like EastEnders and Coronation Street are terribly, terribly bad for you. But if you're listening to the Archers on Radio 4, that's okay. It's still a soap opera, people. But anyway, we're going to be discussing what the hell has been going on at Davos. Donald Trump's promised to drop tariffs to the UK and Europe over Greenland. As big U-turn on seizing Greenland by force. There's some sort of deal that has been double. What is that deal? He's been announcing his board of peace for Gaza. Is Putin on it or not? And how can you have a board of peace for Gaza which involves a country that has just invaded another country? Going to talk about was it kowtowing Keir's trip to China next week, just days after approving China's mega embassy in London. And also the latest from the High Court, Prince Harry yesterday telling the High Court the media had made Meghan's life a misery, and also rejecting claims that his friends could possibly have leaked stories about him. No, it was the hacking, etc., that did it, not his friends leaking stories in his circle. Well, we'll talk about all of that and plenty more besides. As I say, I've not got a specific question for you today because there is just so much to talk about, and I want to hear your thoughts on anything and everything, whether it's what Kemi Badenoch had to say, international affairs. A lot of you getting in touch about that veterans, betrayal, that's what Kemi Badenoch was calling it, involving the Troubles Bill in Northern Ireland, which will basically get rid of the sort of limited basically protection from prosecution that those veterans faced basically for what they did while they were under orders in Northern Ireland. And she has called that a betrayal. That's going to come into force because of, guess what, European Convention on Human Rights. It's always that, isn't it? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, your thoughts on calls for a social media ban for under 16s. Do you trust it will only be for under 16s? Are there better ways of doing this? Why do we always have to move straight to a ban on everything? Give us a call. Let me know what your thoughts are. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text on 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls and text cost your standard network rate. Delighted to say, still with me in the studio, Jake Wallace-Simons, journalist and author. You'll know him well as a guest on the show. I'm trying to have you in the studio with us. Where do we start? Can we just start? I know you do a lot of international affairs. You're a very, very experienced foreign affairs journalist, which has stood you in good stead in the last year doing covering things. But just on that social media ban, just talking to a professor. It seems like it always, when we talk about children, we always have to we go safety first and we go ban. Whether it's whether it's the vapes, whether it's social media, whether it's phones, whatever it is, ban, safety. Are you at all wary of that as someone who's got teenage children? Yeah,
I mean, I think there's a deeper thing going on here, which is the movement of the responsibility for parenting from parents to the state. And we saw that with the children, with the story about the children going to school without even being toilet trained. I mean, use that term for a puppy, but they can't even, and unable to open a book. They think that they can just tap it in, open it. They haven't seen a book in their lives. And we see it again in the government having to ban social media because the parents aren't able to control their own children, raise them in a healthy environment to know how to use social media safely and responsibly. Do
you think most parents can do that? I don't think most parents even know what social media their kids are on.
In the background of all of this, there's two things. I think one is addiction, not just for the kids, but also for the adults and the parents. If you're addicted yourself, how can you then encourage your kids or show them how not to be addicted? And that's because we don't see social media as a toxic toxic danger because it's so recently been invented and overwhelmed all of us.
I genuinely had to sort of wean myself off.
Exactly, it's difficult. But the other thing I think is lockdown, because lockdown turned social media and phones and devices for all children into something that some parents were able to limit, to suddenly it was the only way they could communicate with their friends and with the outside world. So it was open season for all devices. And then, 2 or 3 years on, you then got a whole cohort of addicted kids and addicted adults. And I think putting the toothpaste back in the tube after that is very difficult indeed. But the solution cannot be just to hand it all over to the government. We've got to restore our culture, restore our sense of parenting and our discipline over ourselves, over our parents, over our lives.
And I think it's over ourselves first,
well.
because again, it's just so much easier. And you say, you see people in restaurants. And, I'm a very good, big believer. You're on a long haul flight. Everyone get your iPads out, headphones in, shush. Yeah. we're going to get through it. But again, sitting at the table, everyone's sitting on their different devices, no one talking. For me also, it's what kids are not doing because they're on their phones. When they're sitting in their rooms on their phones, or the worst is you see a bunch of teenagers and they're sitting around with each other and they're all sitting looking at their phones. They're not having banter, they're not learning social interaction, they're not, flirting with each other, teasing each other, they're not playing sport, they're not just learning in human interaction. And then everyone wonders why when they turn up, at university or in the workplace, they can't cope because they haven't learned any of these tools. This is an abject failure of the state. It's an abject failure of parenting. And you say, the state taking over a lot of the parents' jobs, and it seems to me like when you've got parents sending their kids to school who aren't potty trained, toilet trained, you are literally, you have millions of parents who genuinely are too lazy, who are quite happy to go, not my problem. I mean, the idea that you want to spend money on nappies any longer than you have to is utterly bizarre to me. But there are a lot of really lazy, bad parents out there.
But it's part of a whole overall culture. There's a lot of people who are out of work, who are and kids being brought up in generations, in houses, families in which generations have all lived on the dole. So these are people where their world is defined by being given something for nothing. Yep. And it's only a small step from thinking, well, the state's paying for everything, to, well, why can't the state look after my kids? And, my kids aren't potty trained, that's that's the state's fault. My kids are social media addicted, that's the state's fault to deal with, the responsibility to deal with.
But also, I don't mind my kid being social media addicted because they got me old phone or something got off the back of a lorry. And I don't have to talk to my kids. Yeah,
I mean, it's an overall cultural collapse. I think we've lost touch with our old values, our old community structures, our old sense of duty. We lost touch with it via the growth of the state and, of course, the rise of technology.
But also hierarchy. I mean, genuinely, I really think this is a really big issue. The notion that when you're a 25-year-old, you get to tell your boss where you work. Yeah. Whether you work from home or not, or whether you come in on a Monday because it's raining or you don't feel well. The idea that you get to decide whether or not your kid goes to school on a Monday morning because they don't. The idea that the parents can't tell the kids what to do. Yeah. I'm utterly flabbergasted by parents. I'm not saying I'm a perfect parent by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah. But the idea that I wouldn't be able to say to my child, when she was younger, no, you can't have those sweets at the aisle by the till, and not expect a tantrum. I mean, I'm known in my local supermarket. People have got their kids doing that screamy tantrum. Are you in pain? Have you fallen? No. Well, then shut up. Be quiet. Yeah. And people are going, no, seriously, I don't want to listen to it. Have you ever actually tried telling your kids, be quiet? Yeah. I don't want to hear it.
Exactly. I mean,
and then people think you're this terrible person. No, parents who do not discipline their children properly, and I've never hit my child, never would, blah, 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 but parents who don't understand that they are in charge, and it's not just the state of affairs. It is a good thing that they are in charge because it is their job to raise a child into being a useful, happy, healthy, hard-working, contributing adult. That is your job. If you don't want to do that job, use contraception. It's freely available. Do not have a child, really. Yeah. But if you're going to do that job, you want to become a parent, you need to do your job properly. You really need to do your job properly. You have a duty to your child. The parents I know who don't do discipline properly, they spend more time telling their children off than the parents who do, because their kids don't know what the rules are. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on there. Do a whole 3 hours on this, guys. Yeah, I think partly we're still seeing the collapse or the inversion of authority that started with the sexual revolution. Everything was turned upside down, and we're still trying to work out where we are in terms of parenting and society and that. But also, I think we're seeing the collapse of social responsibility, one person to another. I mean, you being in a supermarket and disciplining somebody else's kid is anathema
to most people in Britain.
In
We're
our
just totally
day,
siloed.
Another adult will come up and clip you around the ear if you were misbehaving.
In cultures all over the world, whether it's in Southern Europe, whether it's in the Middle East, whether it's elsewhere, there's a sense of communal responsibility for each other's kids. Even in Japan, young kids walk to school by themselves and strangers help them to cross the road because they feel a sense of family of the nation. We've lost that sense of responsibility for each other's kids.
Yeah.
And when you lose responsibility for each other in that way, everything gets palmed off to the state, and then your country becomes weak because the country is only as strong as the constituency of people within it.
Absolutely.
And that leads us to overall failure.
It's weird because it sounds like a really minor story, but it's actually quite big picture. And a lot of it comes down to, say, that cultural decline that we've got. And the people who are laughing at that most, as we know, let's go back onto the big picture globally. Your real area of expertise. And that is, the Chinese and the Russians who are just... they must be sitting there with the popcorn in Beijing and Moscow just going, oh, what have they done now? So we've got the complete sort of fragmenting of NATO over not just Donald Trump's failure to sort of, to back Europe on Ukraine as solidly as we would have hoped, but over these threats to Greenland. We have threats of tariffs to 8 members of NATO, including ourselves. That's now been dropped. Literally what Donald Trump was saying, on Air Force One over to Davos, and more he was saying last night, complete U-turn. So we're not going to see tariffs, for now. Was not going to be taking of Greenland by a military force. What do we think the deal is? Because certainly the latest articles I've seen, he'd not actually spoken to the Danes about it, but I think he's had a long conversation with the Trump whisperer, Mark Rutte, who's the Secretary General of NATO. But what do we think the deal actually involves?
Well, we don't really know. All we know at the moment is that the American bases will become American soil. So a bit like the deal that that Britain has in Cyprus. Whether they'll be able to then use that American soil to mine down into Greenland's rare earth deposits, we don't know. Greenland is 8th in the world with 1.5 million tonnes of rare earths.
We know they're there, but they're under frozen tundra, basically.
Exactly, but accessible with enough determination, from iron ore, graphite to gold, which perhaps attracts Donald Trump. He's a big fan of gold.
Does like gold. He likes gold too much.
So that could be part of it. But it's worth bearing in mind that Greenland sits at exactly the midpoint between Russia and American soil. That in a war, any missiles going from Russia into America have to pass over Greenland, and that's why it's always been a station for radar bases. It's got security significance because of that. With Trump's Golden Dome idea, speaking of gold again, a missile defence.
Well, explain what that is, because it's basically a version of the Iron Dome over Israel.
Yeah, so in Israel, it's got a few different missile defence systems, but the most famous one is Iron Dome, which stops short-range missiles from coming in by shooting them out of the sky. Amazing. It's like shooting one bullet with another bullet. Technology they said could never work. They managed to get it to work. America wants to do a similar thing on a larger scale called Golden Dome. America, actually, funnily enough, the IDF developed the technology with American funding on condition that America could then own the rights to the intellectual property. But
America is rather bigger than Israel, and therefore they need to be taking missiles coming from further away. They need to be doing it rather higher up in the atmosphere.
Yeah, Israel's got other systems like Arrow, David Sling, that sort of thing with bigger missiles, and so America's going to be basically working on that to produce a bigger system.
But it's real. This isn't sci-fi. This is real.
It's almost sci-fi because it's got to do with space as well. It's got satellites involved and all sorts of things. So it's very ambitious. But Greenland, weirdly enough, this big, beautiful chunk of ice, as Donald Trump has called it, seems like a backwater and totally irrelevant, but actually is key to this strategy.
And especially also, we know with the North Atlantic and these routes and as we see the ice melting. Which, by the way, is happening because we're coming out of an ice age. It's what is happening.
Not because of aerosols.
No, there used to be ice between. There used to be ice over the Channel as well. Do you see how it's climate changes? It's what it does. I want to talk more about international affairs. Just got some more news closer to home. Andrew Gwynn, who was a Labour MP for Gorton and Denton in the northwest, he was sacked as a health minister a while back over offensive WhatsApp messages. Who isn't sacked over offensive WhatsApp messages? It's only a matter of time until you lose me for those. But we understand that he is to stand down as an MP, making way for, guess who? Andy Burnham, the King of the North, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, to run for his seat. There's been a lot of speculation that he would stand down to allow Andy Burnham a return to the House of Commons. He's been denying that in recent weeks, but the expectation is that with an awful lot of support on the National Executive Committee, the NEC that decides who's going to actually run for a seat, and Lucy Powell, of course, as now deputy. This is Lucy Powell. I lose track. Deputy leader of the Labour Party, another no-mark Labour person. I'm sorry, but they all look the same. They all run into each other. Giving help that actually, if we have a by-election, as we will now have, Andrew Gwynn's seat would go to Andy Burnham. Your reaction to this, Jake Wallace-Simons, because the big thing about the threat to Keir Starmer after trouncing at the local elections, assuming any local elections go ahead, they're trying to cancel them all or they'll do badly, is that, well, the most one of the most popular people to stand against him would be Andy Burnham, but he's not even an MP anymore.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a long time in coming. In fact, I had a conversation with a Labour figure just the other day. Wasn't it Clive Lewis who was talking about standing down to give Andy Burnham a run? And this Labour figure was talking about, there's any number of Labour MPs who are willing to stand down for the sake of giving Andy Burnham an in to challenge Starmer. So it's been a long time in coming. If I know about it, then definitely the government knows about it. You'd have thought. But it's interesting that Starmer hasn't been able to take strong action to stop this from happening in the same way that Kemi did with the defection of Robert Jenrick, who's on this programme.
But ultimately, the Labour leadership, we've seen this again and again, I mean, often, especially with candidate selection, when there's an election that's been called, right, no, we're parachuting people in. But there has been this concern that actually in a lot of the seats that in the Manchester area, actually red wall seats that have gone to Labour, but actually very likely to go to Reform, were there to be an election. I mean, Reform would throw everything at such a by-election. Tories, Uber King, loads of Tory voters would go, right, whoever's will vote Reform. You know perfectly well they would if they got a chance to oust Labour from that seat. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I mean, I think it's very clear that Keir Starmer is gasping for his life. He's a wounded animal, and it's really a matter of when, not if, I think, the knife goes into his back or even to his front. There are so many people who want to get rid of him because he is probably the worst Prime Minister we've ever had.
So bad.
Is that an exaggeration? Worst Prime Minister we've ever had?
I mean, did you see PMQs yesterday?
Memory.
Well, it's certainly according to the polls, PMQs yesterday, and lots of people say we had rather good PMQs. I don't think it was Kemi Badenoch's best, certainly. But it was just, I'm very, very clear, and we're standing. It just, I mean, this idea that he's sort of standing up to Donald Trump. We will not yield.
His spin doctors have come up with that phrase, I will not yield. And it was funny because in the reporting of it, it was remarked upon with some hilarity that this was the first time he hasn't actually U-turned on something. And
that's because Donald Trump
did it for him.
Exactly. None of it really tallies, does it? Where we are. Well, that's going to be very interesting to see what happens in that seat. And again, this idea that Andy Burnham would change things, and it is absolutely fascinating. People saying Keir Starmer is this absolutely awful Prime Minister. I don't think there's anyone. Well, according to a poll, 18% of people positive ratings for him, 75% against. Others like, I don't know, I don't care. We've worked out the 18%. That's train drivers, junior doctors, other people in public sector jobs who've had a big pay rise. Well, certainly more than people in the private sector have had. Well, no, they're all voting green.
Students,
and people on benefits.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, they love him. They absolutely love him. But I'm not sure that's the future for a country. But whoever takes over from him, they're not going to be more sane. It's going to be, Angie Rayner, Andy Burnham. Andy Burnham, I think, is a great mayor. But if you actually look at the policies he would pursue, he's talked about, we are talking about moving massively to the left. Ed Miliband having more power. He's a complete, zealot on net zero. We are talking about things getting a hell of a lot worse. I'm talking about getting out of the frying pan, guys, into a very, very, very big inferno-like fire.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that the problem isn't the personality. I mean, yes, the personality is a problem, but that's not the core problem. The core problem is that they're all leftists, and they're going to drive our country into the ground, as the leftists always do.
But they're not even competent leftists.
Over the years.
I could deal with competent leftists.
And I just think back to the last general election, where the phrase I heard again and again when people were thinking of casting their vote was, the Tories have messed things up over 14 years. Let's give Labour a go. How much worse could it get? And now we're finding out. And I think we're going to find out that it could get a lot worse than even we are today before it starts to get better.
It's another happy Thursday, folks. Another happy Thursday.
Yeah, nice and cheerful.
11:21 is the time. So much more I want to talk about with you. We'll come back to this in just a couple of moments. First up, though, it is time to find out how you could be in with a chance to winning a trip of a lifetime to San Francisco. Talk is giving away flights, a 3-night stay in a 4-star intercontinental hotel, and £2,500 in spending money, plus tickets to the Super Bowl to top it all off. Listen to find out how you can enter.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343-418-7260. Lines close 22nd January 2026, 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus, UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at TalkSport.com. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
Well, don't miss out on a trip of a lifetime. A very good luck. 11:22 is the time. Up next, we're going to take a quick break, and then we are going to hear your calls on your thoughts on everything. I'd love you to get the phone lines about the prospect of Andy Burnham, the King of the North, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, possibly getting the Labour nomination to stand in Andrew Gwyn's seat of Gorton and Denton in the Northwest, possibly then putting forward a leadership challenge after the local elections. What would you make of that? Would you welcome it? Would you think, again, be careful what you wish for? Love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Weakness matters. I'm a huge Europhile, whatever. I've done media in Europe for 30 years almost now. I love visiting. I love the people. I'm Irish by beverage, if not by birth. And the weak Europe is a problem for us. Because America, for all the talk of Trump and we're the only, the fact is China is a big problem. An aggressive Russia that ties with China and Iran and North Korea and who knows who else is a bigger problem.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:25. Just that breaking news for you that there's, a possibility for Andy Burnham, the King of the North, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, to make his way back into Parliament. He can't stand for the leadership of the Labour Party and challenge Keir Starmer after what looks set to be terrible, not just local, but Scottish and Welsh elections on May the 7th. If you're not an MP, now we've got an MP, Andrew Gwyn, who's already been suspended from the party for some offensive WhatsApp messages. He is going to basically resign from the party, which means there will be a by-election. Will Andy Burnham win that seat? Will Reform he will even get the nomination from Labour. It might look pretty bad for Keir Starmer if he tries to stop him winning it. He's the most high-profile candidate. But could he possibly be a leader in waiting? Could Reform possibly challenge for that seat? It's going to be fascinating. Love to hear your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk to some guests about that coming up very soon. But always welcome to you. Have your say. Lots more to talk about. Lots of topics today. We're all over the place. At Home Affairs, Foreign Affairs. Let's get straight to your calls. Matthew's on the line in Warrington. And Matthew, you want to talk about the troubles in this bill last night, which basically is going to open our veterans from serving in Northern Ireland to private prosecution.
I listened to Peter last night and the coverage on Talk over it, and I thought it was outstanding. And it was great that it was highlighted because no one else was highlighting it. I think it's an absolute disgrace. is Mr. Starmer going to prosecute the IRA terrorists who killed the 2 little boys in my hometown, Jonathan Ball and Parry?
Yeah.
No, they're not. It's a disgrace. All the Labour MPs and Lib Dem MPs were told to vote for this amendment, which sells all the veterans down the river.
Yeah.
It's all it is doing is making money for these left-wing lawyers in the European human rights to prosecute us veterans. I was in Northern Ireland when the Warrington bombs went off. I'm a Warrington lad. I'm an ex-Welsh Guard. I did 2 years in Northern Ireland, and you know, these lawyers, they've not walked through the bog side and heard guns going off and been told that watch out what you're doing, there's an IED out there waiting for you, and they can't understand when you get back in the camp after an 8-hour patrol that you haven't been blown up because you haven't walked past this IED because they knew that the IRA had them out there.
Yeah.
It's absolute disgrace. We used to go across under the Edmonton Bridge down through the river, and they used to hang cheese wire under the bridge to see if it could cut your throats. This is the IRA. You know, these are grown men, right? These are grown men, and they did dirty tricks, and we did a little bit back. Not saying that we were young men, and we were soldiers, and it's disgraceful.
I mean, obviously, we have to hold our military men and women in uniform to a higher standard than the murderous terrorists, and of course we do. But you know, and where there is wrongdoing by soldiers, and I've always been fascinated by how many veterans will support prosecutions where they believe that, you know, someone's been tortured or some awful deed has taken place. But we're talking about soldiers being prosecuted for doing their normal job as ordered, at the same time as that there is still basically a complete, you know, amnesty for anyone who is involved in a terrorist organisation. The people who are on the run are allowed to come back, people freed from prison. I thought the deal as part of the Good Friday Agreement, I remember covering it as a journalist all those years ago, was that, OK, it was going to be sort of like, you know, what happened in South Africa, you know, truth and reconciliation. We're going to just put the past in the past, and we're going to end it all on all sides. And yes, some people would feel hard done by, but it was better to move forward. This is dragging all the past back up again, but only on one side.
It's scandalous. What they're going to do? Is it going to be the Falklands veterans? Is it going to be the lads in Gulf 1 and 2?
It will be.
The guys who are in Iraq.
We've already seen in Iraq and Afghanistan numerous attempts by the ambulance chases.
Morgan did with the fourth son of saying he was tortured. It was all a cover-up. The British Army, I know, my hand on my heart, the British Army is the most disciplined, respectful army in the world. If we stepped out of line, you'd go in front of the company commander and you'd go in front of the commanding officer. And if you did something wrong, you got 28 days in the click. And that was in every regiment. We you know, I'm not saying the lads didn't do something wrong occasionally, but you got discipline for it.
Yeah, but also in the heat of war, people make mistakes, people do things. And again, I feel the same way about our police. You've got someone with a gun, and people being charged with murder for protecting us and themselves and their colleagues in the heat of the moment. I just think I'm with you. I think it's an absolute outrage, Matthew. I mean, you've got those two perspectives, having fought in Northern Ireland to help defend peace, but also from Warrington with that awful bomb again deliberately aimed at civilians, killing children. Thank you so much for that perspective. I really, really appreciate it, Matthew. Lots of calls like that. I know JK was taking lots of calls on that. And of course, as you know, Peter Cardwell is from Northern Ireland. He knows that stuff inside out, talking about it on his drive show yesterday. Let's go to Ken, who's also on the line, on a very different topic. And Ken, you're in Toulouse, and you want to talk about the kids arriving at school. Basically, it's still in nappies, not toilet trained.
Well, I'm sort of near Toulouse. I'm in a little, very, very conservative, quite odd for France, which is quite socialist, town called Rodez. Yeah. It's heavily conservative, very successful little town, work hard, play even harder kind of place, making money. Yeah. The sort of place that, people like yourself and all your other presenters would absolutely love because it's very conservative. But the very simple rule in France is this. If your child isn't clean or prop, if we're going to use the French word, then it doesn't go to school.
They just won't accept the child.
You may not take your child to school if it's not potty trained. It's dead simple. You
Works
don't come to school. You have to keep it at home, and there's no. They don't give a what's been a whirlwind about your personal familial circumstances. Yeah. If your child isn't clean, it doesn't come to school, and the social embarrassment because that still exists in France. We're still a very conservative country here in that respect. 30 years behind England, but in the good sense. The degradation it's starting, but it's not quite what it is in the UK. The social embarrassment, if your child isn't clean, the mothers are mortified. Absolutely.
As they should be.
Indeed. And you don't get, we haven't quite caught the disease yet of the slippers and jammers down at Aldi.
Oh, don't.
We're not yet. So we're still clinging on in France. We're still clinging
on. Some vague self-respect. Yeah.
Well, the word education in France, is the biggest insult you can pay to any child and its parent is maleducate, badly educated, because the word education is not about school. Yeah. It's about your family education.
But you're basically badly brought up.
And you'd say to somebody, maleducate, there are many words you could use that are an awful lot worse in the English language, but in France, it's the biggest insult you can hand to any child or its parent is maleducate. And it's that. And then we look at how the children sit down to a 4-course meal. My little boy, he sits down to a 4-course meal every day. Now, when he was
without his phone,
which is 3 to 11.
Yep.
Now, my son is a bit of a picky eater. Now, evidently, based on my waistline, I'm not. So then I live near Roquefort, so you can imagine. Now, my son somehow has became a picky eater. We're working slowly on it, but dead straight. He goes to school, or he went to school, and there was no choice. Well, there was. You don't eat, and so for many, many days, my son at school, even though we were paying for the school meals, he didn't eat. I didn't say a word. I didn't complain. That's it, mates. That's it. You're not eating what's given you today.
Works for me, Ken. Thank you so much. What a fascinating call. Very, really interesting. Yeah, it doesn't have to be this way, guys. Thank you. Again, personal responsibility, public shame. These things work. Just saying. Thank you very much indeed for that. Jake Wallace-Simons, you're nodding away.
Absolutely. I think the problem is that kids are not in a position where they're taking responsibility for their own actions anymore.
Yeah.
Everything is taken care of by adults, by parents, by the school, by the state. So whether it's, whether you're late or not for school in the morning, whether it's not you've done your homework, whether you're concentrating or getting up in class, either it's an adult's fault for not making you do it properly or encouraging you to do it.
It's always
you must have ADHD or something like that.
We've seen, haven't we? Yeah, a massive increase in the number of UK adults using ADHD medication. And again, a lot of people say women are being diagnosed much later. But again, an awful lot of these people have already been on antidepressants, have had other issues. We're medicalising, I think, completely normal behaviour, and an awful lot of it comes down to people not being parented properly and not managing themselves.
That's right. I mean, if kids grow up in a world where there's no consequences for what they do, don't eat your food and here's some more food, or don't eat that, here's some more food. All right,
we'll have some ice cream then.
Yeah, and there's no consequences, then they don't grow up taking any responsibility for their own actions, and they become spoiled, and then they become ruinous members of society.
And then they become the Prime Minister. And then we're stuck with them. Or are we? Because it looks like there may be a possibility that Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, could be getting a chance of getting a seat back in Parliament, in which case he could challenge the Prime Minister for the leadership. But there's a lot of different stages up to that point. We're going to talk about that up next with a writer and political organiser, James Schneider. Stay tuned. You do not want to miss this. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:36 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's turn our attention now, well, more to international affairs, but also to what's going on in the Labour Party as well, with James Schneider. He's a writer and political organiser. A very good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Very, very well indeed. Well, I just want to ask you first of all about the breaking news in the last 20 minutes or so that the Labour MP for Gorton and Denton up in the northwest has decided, Andrew Gwynn has decided to basically resign as an MP. He's already been suspended from the party and over some offensive WhatsApp messages accused of writing. He's going to step down. That leaves a nice big vacancy for the Labour nominee. Many are expecting, many had already expected the person who would run for this key job would be, of course, one Andy Burnham, the current mayor of Greater Manchester. Has been talked about a lot as a potential leadership challenger to Keir Starmer, because you have to be an MP to do that. First of all, do you think that Andy Burnham would like this role? Do you think that Andrew Gwynn and him have been speaking in order to enable him to take this role? And do you think he'll win the nomination?
I've got absolutely no idea whether they've been speaking, and I don't know whether Burnham is going to try to get back into Parliament this way. I mean, I think quite clearly he would like to be Prime Minister, and
well, you can't do that if you're not an MP. This is the best chance, isn't it?
This looks like a pretty good chance to get back in, yes. The selection, my understanding of it is that a by-election candidate is selected by a committee, for a subcommittee of the National Executive Committee, which has a majority for Starmer backers. So it'd be interesting to see if Burnham does publicly throw his hat into the ring, whether they let him be the candidate, and if they don't, what kind of backlash there would be to that.
The interesting thing about that, of course, is that, we've got, of course, the deputy leader of the parties on the NEC, Lucy Power, and he's got other allies there. It would look a bit pathetic, wouldn't it, for Keir Starmer to try and block Andy Burnham from winning that nomination if he was the popular choice for the local party. He would look a bit weak and frit, wouldn't he?
I think if it was clear that Burnham was the popular choice from the local party, then yes, of course, that would look anti-democratic. But again, we don't know. Burnham hasn't made his move. We don't know what the support is like for him in that seat, although, of course, it is in Manchester. I think it's in the southeast of Manchester. Burnham is mayor there, and he's pretty popular.
He's certainly a very popular figure. And question is, what would a leadership by Andy Burnham be like? Because a lot of people are very unhappy with Keir Starmer's leadership. 75% of the country apparently don't have a favourable view of him as Prime Minister. Only 80% do. That's probably all the public sector workers and those on welfare right now. But would Andy Burnham, do you think, do better?
So firstly, on your favourability thing, your framing is entirely skewed. If you look at who's happy, yes, totally. Look at the polling. If you look at who's happy with the Labour government, it skews entirely towards high earners, and the rest of people are basically not happy with it. Then if you look at Burnham's,
wait a minute. Why are high earners? Okay, this is the sort of the landlord classes who sort of very much approve of all this sort of.
It was the same thing if you look at support for Labour in the last election.
Yeah.
There was quite significant support in higher earning brackets, and that support has held more solid than other lower income, middle and lower income brackets that have fallen away from Labour while they've been in government. Anyway, that's just a factual point. On Burnham, he was a kind of Blairite New Labour figure who has recast himself in Greater Manchester as a more progressive mayor, one who's willing to use the state to improve the lives of the public, with particularly with publicly owned buses. I think he's done some stuff on housing. So I think his pitch would probably be that he has a clearer idea of what he wants to do, but we're yet to see it. You always see this with princes or princesses over the water. People project into them what they would like to see. Yeah. So
he's certainly a better communicator than Keir Starmer.
He is a very good communicator, and you saw that particularly, I think, in the pandemic, where there was a lot of anger around the country about the different tier system, and I think he
thought he played a blinder on that.
He did, and I think people saw him, yes, he was standing up for his patch, but they also saw that in standing up for his patch, he was really standing up for everyone. And if he can carry forward that sort of thing, then he could be a formidable opponent. But again, it really matters what stall he sets out, if any, and what would be the key policies and the key focus. The reason why the current government is unpopular isn't just because it's, Keir Starmer is not a very good communicator. Much more important is what it's done. Most people are not following politics day to day, but they do feel the impact or the lack of impact from government action.
Yes, they were elected on the policies of change. We weren't quite sure what changed, but everything was going to get better. 18 months in, still blaming the Tories for everything that's going wrong in the world. The trouble is, of course, that doesn't really fly with voters who would go, well, what about us now? What should Keir Starmer, what should the Labour Party be doing differently back at home, certainly? I want to get on to world affairs in just a moment with you, just briefly, but what should they be doing back at home to win back support?
You need to take on the entrenched power of the super rich, who have been getting hugely richer for the last 2 decades, while most people's lives haven't been getting any better. There is lots of money going around in our country. It's just in the wrong hands. And I think if the government were sufficiently motivated and strong on the side of the overwhelming majority of people to redistribute back some of that wealth and power, which is currently being sucked towards the super top, then it would be much more popular, because then it would actually be a government on the side of the ordinary person.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people would like a government on the side of the ordinary person. I'm not quite sure we need to attack the super rich to do it. I don't think it's a zero-sum game, is it?
Well, if you look at the way the economy has been going in the last 20 years, almost all of the growth has been sucked to the top 0.01%. So in this case, yes.
But that's largely, isn't that a lot of that will be about policies? For instance, if you import millions of people from overseas to do jobs, you lower wages because you increase supply, and then people can't see their wages go up. If people are poorer because they can't afford their housing because we haven't built any new houses.
Julia, I'm afraid you're missing the key point, which is what's driving inequality is wealth inequality. Wealth inequality is driven by a system that increases asset prices, that sucks wealth to the top. We've had enormous policies, quantitative easing chief among them, where money was doled out and gave enormous distributional effects, which basically means people who had a lot of stuff got way more stuff, which then sucks investment in the economy away from the productive sectors and towards the hoarding of assets. That's fundamentally why we've got the problem. If we don't engage with that, nothing else particularly matters.
Well, I'm not entirely sure that punishing the rich. I'm all for fair taxation. I'm all for
not punishing the rich. If let's say, through basically not doing anything, your assets. Let's say you've got £20 million in financial assets.
But how did people get that in the first place?
Well, generally speaking, by having £10 million in financial assets.
No. Most people who are wealthy in this country, other than a few dukes and things, have actually made the money themselves by selling us goods that we want to buy. I'm all in favour of those people being very rich.
If only that were the case, we would have a hugely more productive economy, and we would have investment going into production rather than to the
Well, we don't have investment going into production in this country because we've got mad net zero policies, but that's down to Tories as well as Labour. Let me get you on to foreign affairs just for a moment. What do you make of what the Keir Starmer has been doing? I don't think you're a big fan necessarily of Keir Starmer, but what do you make of his handling of international affairs where we are at the moment with the threats over Greenland from Donald Trump? Him saying, he would not relent, he was going to stand firm. His dealings with the Chinese, agreeing to this big mega embassy just across the river from me here, and then going off to kowtow to the Chinese president next week. What do you make of those moves?
It was a better tone yesterday from him at PMQs, but Starmer is carrying forward basically the same policy of every single British government for a very long time, which is to just slipstream behind the United States. We operate as a vassal of the United States without an independent foreign policy, without an independent defense and security policy, and US companies own a tremendous amount of our economy. We are not able to, and have not been able to, take decisions that would be enormously popular in the country, i.e. democratic, on questions of foreign policy, because we are forced to follow along with the US. That is not an independent.
But that's because we don't have the military might to the power, the diplomatic power to have to move away that far from American power. How much more do you think we should spend on defence?
Perhaps it would be a good idea to start doing that.
How much more should we spend on defence so we can carry that big stick that would give us more power?
Well, I think first of all, on the question of defence, we have to look at how much is wasted and how much is wasted again by being a US vassal. When Donald Trump says we have to spend more money on defence, what that means is we spend more of our money on US weapons, which push up the share prices of Donald Trump's donors. Let's look at imports of weaponry into Europe, including Britain, from 2020 to 2024. It has gone up 155%, and almost 2/3 of those imports have come from the US.
Well, that's because they're an ally. They make good stuff, and we can't make anything ourselves because of our energy prices.
They don't make good stuff. Let's look at two very high-profile programs.
James, I'm going to take it as read that you're acting on that because I can't give you the right back to reply because it's 11:47 and I've got to go to a break. I am so sorry. Come on again another day where we don't have quite so much to talk about. We can have this debate in more full. James Schneider, writer and political organiser, thank you so much. I'm going to go to a quick break because up next we are going to talk about, royal battles in the courts once again. We'll talk about that with Dickie Arbiter, a former press secretary to the late Queen. This is Talk.
We were all just mates. We were all just Londoners. We weren't just all in a different demographic box. He divided and conquered. And so I want to unite and not conquer. I want to give London back to Londoners.
And so in a sad sense, I'm not surprised that this has happened because the bar is so low.
They were all booing him. People were saying, swearing at him, etc. So there is a real hatred for Khan. People have accused him of being an unscrupulous Nepo baby, and he really is. I mean, the man, I wish he had talent,
it's
but
also,
unfortunately
I think
doesn't.
Okay. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:50 is the time. Let's talk royals. I know I always hate myself a little bit when I do these items, but this is a major court case. It's going to take many weeks, although everyone was pretty surprised when Prince Harry in the High Court yesterday, the Royal Courts of Justice, was only in the witness box for just a measly 2 hours. He was expected to do an entire day. Well, he was complaining that the media had made not just, previously his own mother's life a misery, but of course his current wife, his wife, I'm not implying anything, Meghan's life a misery, and insisted that it must have been some sort of nefarious action by the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday that got them a number of big exclusive stories about his life, because he absolutely insists that it wasn't people in his close circle of friends who were divulging those secrets. Well, let's talk about this with Dickie Arbiter. He's former press secretary to the late Queen and also a former royal journalist. Dickie, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure, Julia.
It's fascinating. I mean, this is the third major court case Prince Harry is taking part in. He was in the witness box, got quite emotional talking about all of this. And this is really clear. This isn't just about, money for him, getting a settlement. And there are 7 people in total, including the likes of Elton John and others who are also bringing this case against the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday. But this is really personal for him.
It's very personal for him, and he's obviously got an axe to grind. In his witness statement, he was saying that he wants truth, justice and accountability. Now, I can understand justice and accountability, but after Oprah in 21, 6 hours of Netflix at the end of 21, and his biography Spare, whose truth? His truth or the truth? There's a lot to be answered for. He really has got the bit between his teeth, and I'm not sure what's driving him. Because he's being driven by something, because this has cost almost £40 million so far.
What?
And the only people that are winning are the lawyers.
I mean, those lawyers, and Sherborne, I mean, he appears at every single one of these court cases. That man, we were discussing, he must have castles, and he must own Caribbean islands by now with all his fees. 40 million quid, and that is what's being spent on the lawyers.
Well, that's what is being suggested has been not necessarily the lawyers, but the case so far.
Wow.
And that is a lot of money in anybody's book. And as I said a moment ago, the only real winners in this are the barristers.
Yeah.
Whether Harry comes out with anything remains to be seen.
That said, of course, look, he did win his case against the Mirror Group, and he got a payout there. He also did a settlement with the news group, newspapers who own The Sun, and there was an apology. There was a admission that private investigators may have used nefarious means to gain stories, but certainly not Sun-employed journalists. But there was a payout there. Now, these numbers don't come to light. We don't hear the numbers, but reliably informed, they are in the substantial millions in total, is what has been reported. Lots of expectation that there was going to be a settlement here. In this case, but it does seem like the Mail is going to fight this all the way. There's been some aspects of this case which sort of, have changed in terms of a private investigator who had written a sworn statement and then says, he doesn't, that he was forced to do that and he doesn't stand by it. That sort of, put things up in the air a bit, hasn't it? But how do you think this case is going to go?
Well, it's going to go on and on because the Mail Group, Associated Newspapers, they're really digging their heels in, and they're not going to let go. They're not going to come to a settlement unless it's in their favour. And Harry is not going to settle unless it is in his favour. And he goes on about his wife being mercilessly reported on. A lot of it is self-inflicted. I mean, if you go back years when Harry would, before he went into the army, he'd go clubbing on a regular basis and fall out of these clubs somewhat inebriated. And of course, he's going to get reported on. He's got to learn to behave himself. He's got to learn to do something concrete rather than fighting these newspapers.
Well, he was getting very good coverage over when he was a veteran. When he was fighting, we didn't know for those first 6 months that he was actually over fighting in Afghanistan. But here's the thing. From what I can understand, I was a news reporter, I did doorsteps, I did all that stuff. We are talking often about reporters, often for magazines, freelance reporters, freelance photographers and the like. Most of these things tend to come from freelancers that actually, they're not just there and taking a photo of him when he's a bit drunk. They are sort of in his face. They are goading him, and this happens with celebrities and other roles, and actually pushing people. Diana used to talk about the stuff that went into Andrew Morton's book about how they would literally try and goad her and hustle her until she cried, and then they get the picture they wanted. I've always felt I wouldn't wish being a royal on my worst enemy. I think it's a terrible life. He didn't choose that life, and I'm thinking, you're a teenager or you're a lad, you fought in the army, you've got a right to come out of a nightclub a bit drunk every now and then. It's none of my business.
Well, it was actually before he went into the army that he was falling out of a nightclub, getting drunk. But he did very well in the army, and it's something that he should never have left because he was fitted in the army, and it worked for him. It's all gone downhill since. And yes, he did fight the news of the world, and the Sun and the Daily Mirror, and he got a settlement there. Obviously, they were getting their stories by all sorts of means that they don't do today. But the Mirror, the Associated Newspapers are quite clear. They've been absolutely straight in the way they get stories. And Harry says his friends don't talk. Well, I know from my own experience in the days when things were going wrong between Charles and Diana, Charles's friends used to talk to the media, and we had a hell of a job to try and keep them to shut them up.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, we've heard from so many, whether it's celebrities or whether it's royals involved in these cases, that actually the paranoia that they have because they feel like, but I only told one person. This how on earth does this come out? But the reality is, and again, as we saw, I remember again the Andrew Morton book, and everyone was going, well, he must have made all this up. And then there are all these tapes of Diana talking to him. A lot of these stories were coming often from the people themselves, from their PRs, with their agreement, or from their close circle of friends. And just a nod and a wink. And let's face it, sometimes for money. There were quite often quite big sums available to people who were talking.
Exactly. But, the other thing that Harry was saying is that he was made to perform for the media. Nobody told him to. If you look at William, he doesn't perform for the media. He does things because he wants to do things. Late Queen didn't perform for the media. Charles doesn't perform for the media. If you're of a certain character and you enjoy a good laugh, yes, you're going to do certain things and they're going to pick them up. But it's not all the media. A lot does fall on Harry. And he's got a lot to answer for in the way some of the stories have been presented. Take Las Vegas, strip billiards. It happened. It came out from people who were at the party.
Yeah, they had photos. Again, I've got no problem with him doing that. It's just, you have to understand your position. But here's the thing. We'd all have a lot more sympathy for him, wouldn't we? If he'd gone away, he'd married the woman he loves, and they'd gone away, and they said, we don't want our titles. We're just going to live a private life. Please leave us alone. We would have been really happy for them. But instead, he's basically sold his story to the highest bidder with some of the most incredibly intimate details of their engagement, their children, and, and his family, and conversations with his family. I mean, he talks about having his own privacy being abused, but he's abused his own and his family's privacy. Dickie Arbiter, really good to get your perspective there as a former press secretary to the late Queen. Thank you for joining us. Jake Wallace-Simons. I mean, again, Harry was a hero once, but I don't know. I don't know the rights or wrongs of this case. A judge is going to decide on this case, but but Harry playing the victim doesn't really ring true anymore after he'd made all this money from Netflix and Spare and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels so tragic to me, this whole thing, because he was a bright young man and brilliant in the RAF and seemed to have a really good future ahead of him as
except he wouldn't be allowed to fight.
Member of the royal family. Sorry, he
wasn't allowed to fight after 6 months when international media found out he was in Afghanistan. He had to come home.
Well, that's true, and of course he's had trouble with the media. Let's not downplay that in his earlier life, and as his mother did, of course, it goes without saying. And yet there's something missing from all this, and it's the kind of stiff upper lip, duty comes first, I'm serving my country, royal family attitude. Never complain, never explain. It's so exemplified by William.
Yeah, but maybe he doesn't
father.
Have that personality.
And he just seems to have missed out on that. It all seems to be about poor me. It's something narcissistic about it, something wallowing about it.
And then he married a woman with exactly the same tendencies.
Yes, and the fact that he's willing to sell his own privacy to the media via Oprah, via his autobiography or whatever, on his own terms and make money off it, means that he can't complain.
Absolutely, that's the issue, isn't it? Love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Plenty more coming up, including Seb Gorka up next. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Very much appreciate your company, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device. Thank you so much for joining us. So much to talk about, as always. It's been like this for a couple of weeks now. Non-stop breaking news, I have to say. A lot going on. If you do miss anything of the show, if you've missed anything, do go to my YouTube page, The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe and you never have to miss a thing. In just a moment, we're going to be joined by Senior Advisor to President Donald Trump. That's Sebastian Gorka. Delighted to have him on the show. We're going to be discussing Donald Trump's promise to drop tariff threats to the UK and Europe over Greenland, his apparent U-turn on seizing Greenland by force. But what exactly is his deal over Greenland? We're also going to be talking about whether Labour is trying to unwind Brexit. Also, the team of 65 civil servants hunting more than 53,000 illegal migrants and foreign criminals who have disappeared. Given they can't keep track of the ones who are actually in the hostels, I'm not holding out much hope for that. Big breaking news in the last hour that an MP who has been sitting in a seat which has been very much thought about as the seat that Andy Burnham may well want. That is Andrew Gwynn. He has decided to stand down from his seat. We're looking at a by-election in the Manchester area where the Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham does look set. Well, but we think it'd be very unlikely if he doesn't throw his hat into the ring to stand as an MP there. Also, some other breaking news in the last couple of moments. The local government secretary, Steve Reid, has just told MPs in the House of Commons that 29 council elections scheduled for May this year, or May the 7th, will now be postponed as part of the government's reorganisation plans. They gave local councils the right to decide whether or not they wanted to postpone or not. And what a surprise, most of those are Labour councils, expecting a trouncing from Reform. I think one is Tory, I think one is Lib Dem. We'll get the details on that, but it's even worse than the 27 many of us had predicted. Joining me for the chat all this show and for the next hour as well is Jake Wallace-Simons, journalist and author. Cannot wait to get your thoughts on this, but I've got a guest waiting on the line. So I'm going to come to you in a few moments for your thoughts, particularly on those local elections. First up, though, let's turn our attention to international affairs with Sebastian Gorka, Deputy Assistant to President Trump and a Senior Director for Counter-Terrorism in the White House. A very good afternoon to you, Seb.
Happy New Year, Julia. Great to be back.
Happy New Year. You're right. It's the first time we've spoken in this year. Great to have you. It's been a bit of a new year, hasn't it? I mean, I can't believe the president has only been in his second term for just a year and a day or two now, because we've had such a whirlwind of news. Do you know, because you're very close to the president and have been for many years, do you know what this new deal on Greenland is and why he decided to, let's face it, backtrack, stand down, U-turn on his threat of military action, seizing Greenland by force, and tariffs on NATO countries, including Britain, who didn't say, yes, that's fine, sir?
Even if I did, which would be a little bit strange as the head of counterterrorism for the president to be in the negotiations for Greenland, I would not be sharing them because they are completely confidential as of now. But I can tell you, as a taxpayer, as somebody who cares for America and its national security, the importance of this deal is paramount for not just America, but for Western civilization. There's a reason that after the continent was invaded and captured by the Nazis, the ambassador in exile to Denmark begged the then White House to take control of Greenland, to keep those shipping lanes free and not under the control of the Third Reich. So there's a history here. Look at a map, look at its proximity to America, not to Europe. So he is, I tell everyone, whether you like him or not is irrelevant. Read The Art of the Deal. The president who's brought peace to 8 historic conflicts, Sharm el-Sheikh, Gaza, you name it, on down. This is the man who can broker any deal. He's been doing it for 50 years in the private sector, and now he's doing it for all of us, for Western civilization.
Well, I know that's certainly the Trump view of these things. And we'll come on to Gaza.
This is why you invited me, I presume, for the Trump view of things.
Well, that's exactly right, Sebastian. You say it's confidential. Donald Trump, when asked about this deal, said, it was complex. Certainly it comes around after a conversation conversation with Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, who everyone seems to view as the sort of the Trump whisperer. He seems to be able to talk him around on various different things. Can
I just interject there for a moment, Julia? I've heard this before about other people. There is no Trump whisperer. The idea that others can control this man's decision-making is absolutely fallacious.
Can influence. Well, we're told that Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, is the Trump whisperer.
Yeah, is that why he's going to Beijing instead of to Davos?
Very, very fair point. We'll come back to that as well. Look, you said that your president, he's trying to bring peace, and there's no doubt at all Greenland is significant, but there was never any need to make threats of a military invasion or seizing the country. I mean, you've got the right to have military bases any time, any number of troops you want there at any time. This could have been a nice, pleasant conversation behind the scenes with NATO allies. Why did it have to be like this? Why did it have to be with threats on the table?
Well, look, I actually started my career 30 years ago on NATO issues, and we've just had it. We've underwritten this entity, and now it's an expectation that they behave as real allies. That's the point of it.
You're talking about Europe.
Yeah, the European members of NATO. We are not here to fund your defense and to save you from another invasion like we did twice already in the 20th century. So the president's expectations are very clear. This isn't about, white table, white cloth diplomacy in, Geneva or Davos. It's about being serious and acting like serious nations. There's one country which has vouchsafed Western civilization since the First World War, and it is ours. So the old ways of doing business have been jettisoned. Why? Because we're about serious people doing serious things for our common interests. I strongly recommend all of your listeners, all of your viewers, go and read the president's national security strategy, which he signed and released just before Christmas. It's the explication of everything he's doing in the world.
We've discussed many times on this show about how Donald Trump was right in 2018 when he called out NATO for not spending enough. We're still not spending enough. Most countries not spending, including our own nation, our own defence chiefs and others, I think, are tearing their hair out at the lack of that. What do you make of all these allegations that Donald Trump is tearing down the rules-based order, the post-war, dividend, the Western alliances, and that actually the only people who are really benefiting from this and probably chuckling away today, and as have they been probably for the last few weeks, are Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, so let's start with the reality, not the Panglossian beautiful version of some world that never existed. There never was a rules-based order. If there was a rules-based order, you wouldn't have had the invasion of Afghanistan, you wouldn't have Rwanda, you wouldn't have the Uyghur labor camps in China. It is a fantasy of the talking heads and the elites who have done what? Under the cover of rules-based order, betrayed their own countries, whether it was the outsourcing of jobs, destroying the working class in the US and in many other countries, or whether it was things like undermining the writ of the British people. I am proud as somebody who was born in the UK to see more than 17 million Brits, the biggest vote ever, vote for independence as a country in Brexit. And then what happened? The quote-unquote experts who said, we have a rules-based order, tried incessantly for almost a decade to undermine the writ of the British people. This idea that there's some sacred cow of globalism that must be protected. Globalism is what screwed the working class around the world, and now it's over, at least in America.
No, I'll say here to all of that. You and I have lots of bones of contention, but on that we are absolutely in agreement. In terms of rules-based order that doesn't really exist, it's all about might, not necessarily someone's perception of right. Let's talk about the Board of Peace, because on our screens, the split screen a lot of the time, we've been showing footage from Davos where the US president has been welcoming other world leaders, not all of them joining. Queens like Keir Starmer's not there, Emmanuel Macron of France isn't there. This Board of Peace, it was supposed to be just about Gaza. By all accounts, he's invited Vladimir Putin to join the Board of Peace. It's a bit rich to have a man who's leading a country that has invaded a European nation, is right now killing civilians in Ukraine, to be on the Board of Peace supposedly for Gaza, isn't it?
Well, not if you live in the real world. I mean, let me just.
Well, the real world of mass killings. An invading of sovereign nation
the real
states.
world of actually trying to get peace instead of just talking about it. I mean, let's just wind the taper back a little bit. And that incredible footage, not just today when we see these pictures of the president sitting there initiating the border peace in Davos, but originally in Sharm el-Sheikh. Look, I've known this man since 2015. I've known him for more than a decade. Even I could not believe who he brought to the table at Sharm el-Sheikh.
It was extraordinary.
It was extraordinary, and not only that, well done. The fact that it's not a war somewhere far away. This isn't Cambodia. This isn't Democratic Republic of Congo. It is the most benighted area of the world. It is the Middle East. As the president said, millennia of conflict. Who did he invite to Sharm el-Sheikh? People miss this, and it really speaks to who the president is. He even invited the supreme leader of Iran. He left the door open. He said, if you want to show your people of Persia who you really wish to be, come to Sharm el-Sheikh. Well, of course he didn't. He's a murderous mullah. We know what that regime is. The president is what we call preparing the field. He's shaping the geopolitical context. If you want to have peace in our time, you can't say, oh, well, let's ignore a nation with thousands of nuclear weapons. No, you have to leave the door open for an opportunity when someone like Putin or the mullahs say, you know what? For maybe my own benefit, for maybe the benefit of my country, it's time to stop invading other countries. It's time to stop being an authoritarian. So this is, again, I go back to the beginning. It's a short book. Everyone should read it. The Art of the Deal. Okay. This is the art of the deal.
Vladimir Putin isn't going to stop being an authoritarian. This is the one.
You don't know that. Unless you've got a crystal ball.
Yeah, I do. I'll put my life on that one. Donald Trump said it would take him just 24 hours to sort out Ukraine. I don't think anyone really believed that would happen. He's talked repeatedly how you stopped doing other wars. I thought what he did in Gaza was superb. I don't know whether we're going to maintain peace. Getting those hostages back, I don't think any other American president could have done it like that. All credit to him. I always give credit where I think it's due. On Ukraine, though, although I thought he would be stand up on Israel, and he was, I always knew there was a concern over Ukraine. Why does he, again and again, why does Steve Witkoff, his peace envoy, why on earth do they keep taking the word of Vladimir Putin when Vladimir Putin is bombing civilians, not just military, bombing civilians in a nation state that is an ally of America and the Brits, where Britain and America, by the way, had an agreement where we signed, where we guaranteed this country's borders if they gave their nuclear weapons back to Russia. Why on earth does he trust anything that Vladimir Putin says to him about Ukraine?
I'll quote another great American president, Ronald Reagan, when he was talking about the Soviet Union: trust but verify. This is the biggest sticking point between us, Julia. I just have to try and bring you into the real world, okay? There is only one person, after stopping 8 historic conflicts, some intractable, such as Armenia and Azerbaijan, only he was able to do it. Only he will bring peace to the Ukraine. But I ask you, what's the alternative? Is the alternative to say, no, we're not talking to Moscow, or we're going to get somebody else in to negotiate? Let's have the Chinese come in and negotiate.
No, that's not the alternative. Is that America ensures that Ukraine can defeat Vladimir Putin, and the message goes out: you don't get to invade a sovereign nation state that is part of America's. Okay, not under the NATO umbrella, I accept that, but part of what should be American sphere of influence.
No, but you have to take your thread to its logical conclusion. Are you saying that when Europeans who are on the same continent as Ukraine aren't deploying their forces to the soil of Ukraine to protect it, that it's our job?
No, the Ukrainian president has never said we need the blood of American or European soldiers. I'm not saying that. I'm saying specifically not that. But the weaponry that Zelensky has been begging for years now,
which we have been providing. I mean, think about it. Under the Obama administration, when it was first invaded, it was weird. It's only under Democrats that Russia invades its neighbors. The Washington White House provided, and this isn't a joke, your listeners are going to think that, Seb's crazy here, Google it. they gave blankets to Kiev. And it's Kiev, by the way, it's not Kyiv. When we came in the first Trump administration, we gave Javelin anti-tank missiles, the game changer for Kiev in Ukraine. So don't tell us we're not doing enough from 8,000 miles away.
Well, currently Donald Trump is, you're selling weapons to the Europeans and the Europeans are giving them to Ukraine. But we could be doing more. Look, the might of the Americans plus the not so might, and it should be more, and I completely understand, no way should the security of Europe be paid for by the taxpayers in Wisconsin or Texas.
Correct.
I've got no issue with that, and I've been saying that for years. However, America could be preventing Ukraine from being, people being massacred current time. The deal that keeps being on the table, these different 18, 20 or 28 point plans, these deals are basically saying to the Ukrainians, give away 20% of your territory to a foreign invader with no real guarantee that we'll be there if Putin comes back for more, as he undoubtedly would. That's not a peace deal. We could have had peace with Hitler if we'd said, yeah, you can have the whole of Europe, you can have Britain, not a problem. You can have peace with anybody if you don't fight them. But surely what America stands for, surely what Donald Trump should stand for, is actually that, you're not going to be treated as a sucker. Vladimir Putin treats your president as a sucker.
Yeah, you're completely wrong. You predicted the future moments ago. I'll take you up on that. I'll see you and I'll raise you. I predict right now there will be peace in Ukraine, and it will be because of one man, my boss, President Trump. So let's return in a couple of weeks, and we'll see who was right.
Well, there'll be abject surrender. I can absolutely see a scenario where there would be surrender in Ukraine. Peace sometimes involves not giving up, not waving the white flag.
But again, you've gone back to what we did, and we really have to move on because you did this last time. Are you prepared? Are the Brits prepared to fight for those territories of Ukraine? Or are you saying
the Ukrainians have never said they expected a drop of foreign blood to
I'm not talking about the Ukrainians. You're talking about the territory of a putative deal you know no details of. If you want to take that territory back, who's going to do it, Julia?
The Ukrainians could do it if they had the right weaponry.
Really?
They could.
I'm glad you think so.
They seem to think so. Right, let's move on.
Yeah, that's one thing.
Let's move on. We haven't got much time. You're quite right. You talked about China. Keir Starmer, he's got another nickname. He's had many a nickname since he's been in office in 18 months. But Kowtow Keir, signing over the rights to the Chinese to have a big mega embassy, a spy centre just across the river from where I am right now, next to the Tower of London, of all places. And then, what a surprise, 24 hours later, it's announced that Beijing is going to allow him to come over on a trade visit. We've also had criticism from your president, quite rightly, over the surrender of the Chagos Islands to the Mauritian government, completely under the thumb of China. Would America be in a position to veto either of these deals?
It's very interesting you raised the Chagos Islands. So if the Chagos Islands are so important to the viewers and listeners of your show, the analog to Greenland is absolutely there. If you look at strategic locations in the interest of national security, then you have to admit that Greenland is just a larger version of Chagos. With regards to the prior comment, look, you don't need to have security clearances and read the president's daily briefing like I do to understand what China represents. They have said unequivocally in the open source, if you look at One Belt, One Road, if you look at the book by Chinese colonels from the People Liberation Army that is called Unrestricted Warfare, they have an intent to be the world's only hegemon.
Yep.
Literally to wipe everybody else off the planet in terms of geopolitical influence and to be the dominant superpower in the world.
Yeah. They said the quiet bit out loud.
Yeah, they say the quiet bit out loud. And to quote a survivor of the Holocaust, when a group of people repeatedly say they want to destroy you, sooner or later, you should listen to them and take them seriously. So again, it's a choice of living in the real world or a fantasy world. If you have the world's largest communist dictatorship that has labor camps, maybe you should reassess the way that they should be influencing your country. I'm not giving advice to 10 Downing Street, but we know here in the White House, the president especially, what China is and what China is trying to do. Please live in the real world. What is the tag tagline for your show. You know, it's
Home of
the
common sense.
Common sense. The Trump administration is about the revenge of common sense.
Okay, just finally, I mean, Donald Trump was very clear in his speech at Davos, at Europe, but, you know, Britain, France, he had to go out saying, you know, these countries got problems with immigration, with this net zero policy, and I couldn't agree with him more on this. Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, said she agreed with him on this in an interview with me earlier this morning. Would Donald Trump find it easier to deal with Britain if we had Prime Minister Nigel Farage rather than Prime Minister Keir Starmer? Would we be closer allies then?
Look, the president in his speech, it's the most personal I've ever heard him do this publicly, discussed of his deep familial ties to Europe, to Scotland, his mother, to Germany through his father. There's a special relationship always and always has existed between the UK and the US. And I'll just say this, we are not going to determine for the people of the UK who they choose as their leaders. That's the antithesis of Brexit. It's the antithesis of MAGA. But of course, I know Nigel very well. Nigel has a very close, you know, friendly relationship to the President of the United States, the most powerful man in the world. I can't predict what the Brits will do, but you know, when you have a friendly, it's like me in this position now. My friends are cabinet members. Yeah. When Kash Patel's running the FBI, when Pete Hegseth is the Secretary of War, it makes things easier to achieve if we had friends who are, you know, elected by their people to be the heads of those governments. Of course, things would be, you think, probably smooth, but that's a decision for the people of the United Kingdom.
Lovely to talk to you. Fascinating. We covered a heck of a lot of ground. Globally, I would say, Sebastian Gorka is Deputy Assistant to President Trump and Senior Director for Counter-Terrorism. Thank you so much for joining us there live from the United States. Jake Wallace-Simons, I mean, I think we covered everything there. I mean, we didn't cover the domestic issues in America. I think there are just so many world issues, so many issues affecting us. Your thoughts on what he had to say?
Well, frankly, I think he speaks a lot of sense most of the time. It's only the other extra 10%. Like, nobody denies that Greenland is important for America's national security. Maybe not for Western civilization, but it's certainly important. But then why can't you just work with NATO to bolster that security rather than threaten to effectively invade it, for example? But I think that my real takeaway from that was he repeated again and again, you've got to live in the real world. And what that means is the collapse of the rule-based international order, or not even the collapse, the assertion that it never really existed in the first place. That's really what he was saying. And what that represents is an exchange of a value-based set of alliances for a strength and power-based set of alliances.
But that value-based, the Western alliance was based on that. But you only have any strength, not because the rule of law, but because of your willingness and your ability to enforce those laws. And that comes down to the realpolitik of how many missiles have you got, how many men have you got to put on the ground?
Yeah, and frankly, those values became corrupted because they became equated to the kind of centrist, fundamentalist, globalist values that most people didn't share. So,
but also China and Russia just played us
and
out.
of course, they can then exactly manipulate us through that vulnerability. So I think that a return to real world politics actually isn't a bad thing, but it just seems like there could be a bit less belligerence towards our allies. I mean, he was berating us for not behaving like allies. Well, how's Trump behaving?
Yeah, exactly. It didn't have to be like this. There we are. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that interview as well. Up next, we're going to take a quick break. Going to take some calls. Also going to be talking about the fact that the local government secretary, Steve Reed, has told MPs in the House of Commons this morning that 29 local council elections scheduled to take place on the 7th of May this year will now be postponed. Some of those council elections have already been postponed for a year. This is because of this justification of this local government reorganisation. This is using a law supposed to be for wartime and exceptional circumstances. I'm not entirely sure restructuring local government fulfills that. We know, of course, reform are challenging this, but 29 local council elections are now going to be postponed. We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
Well, I see somebody who has changed his tune throughout time to suit his purpose, who is personally very, very ambitious, and I'm afraid what he's been saying, certainly at the time of his defection, does not fit with what he was saying when he was within the Conservative fold. You know, this is somebody, Jeremy, who was quite happy to sit at the shadow cabinet table nodding away with others and so on, but as soon as the moment arrived, suddenly he changed his tune, and I think people will draw their own conclusions on that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, what rip-roaring show again it is. 12:28 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Interesting to hear Sebastian Gorka, close aide to the American president, comparing their policies and our slogan for our show. Lots to talk about. I'm going to take your calls in just a couple of moments. 0344 499 1000. Lots of you getting in touch on lots of things at home and abroad. But just check, Simons, just want to get your views on the local government secretary, Steve Reed, announcing this morning that 29 local council elections scheduled for May this year are going to be postponed now as part of these reorganisation plans. I mean, we thought it was, I think 27 was the worst case scenario. Most of these we know are Labour councils, but I think there was a Tory and a Lib Dem in there, possibly some no overall control. Basically, it's a load of councillors going, I think I'll keep my job as a councillor for another year, thank you very much, because otherwise I think I'll probably be ousted by reform.
Yeah, I mean, this is the government subverting democracy. Let's make it as clear as we can. And it's funny that, you know, often the people who shout loudest about rules-based international order and human rights and universal values and democracy are the ones most willing to pull the levers of the machine to quash it.
Well,
and that's
undermining
exactly
the Brexit vote.
Exactly, yeah, undermining the Brexit vote. I mean, Starmer tried to get a second referendum to make us undo the democracy that we'd expressed. It's the European Union playbook. They've done it with the Irish, they've done it with others as well.
The vote again, or we won't have a vote on it.
Exactly, and it's the same playbook again, and it undermines democracy. And funnily enough, I sometimes think that Keir Starmer behaves a bit like Donald Trump, using the levers of democracy to subvert it. Donald Trump mused just last week in an interview with Reuters about possibly cancelling the midterms because Republicans in the polls are getting a battering. That even he hasn't gone as far as Keir Starmer,
and he really wouldn't be able to.
Them.
This is the thing. There are no extenuating extreme circumstances. It's absolutely ridiculous. This is abject incompetence.
Hiding behind procedure.
Hiding behind procedure, and it's just outrageous. And there's no reason why this couldn't then be used at another time, you know, to prevent general elections going ahead. And if anyone seriously thinks that this would be allowed to happen, because again they say, well, it's not up to us, it's local councils. You let the people who are going to lose their seats decide whether or not there's a vote. What do you think? But crucially, if they thought that they were going to do well in these local elections, they wouldn't be thinking of cancelling them. It is really that simple. It's an outrage. We're going to talk to Lord David Frost. I'll talk to him about that as well coming up. First up, though, let's get your calls on Donald Trump. Andrew is in Hertfordshire, wants to have his say. Andrew, what do you want to say about, I don't know, whatever the hell it is Donald Trump's done today?
Yeah, good morning, Julia.
Afternoon.
Great to hear your voice. Afternoon, sorry. Look, he is, in relation to women and women in sports, you couldn't support him more. That was a really good policy and he drove it home. But since then, he's lost the plot. He reminds me very much of Idi Amin. We're giving him awards.
What a line!
Because we're paying to basically a bully. He's never, ever stood up to anyone. And Putin is running him ragged. And if you look at the situation in Iran, he sold those people down the road. He told them he was there for them. He ran away. And the Ayatollah did something which showed you where the real power is in the world. He spoke in Russian. And the minute he did that, he was saying, America, back off. Because Russia's got Iran's back, because that's where all the missiles are coming from.
Russia can't take on the might of America. But no, he shouldn't have told people to go onto the streets and we'll help you and then not be there. I mean, whether he should have made that promise in the first place or not. I think there's lots of things that Trump's done really well, which I'm really, really in favour of. The immigration, the net zero policies, you know, the culture wars, you know, the trans stuff. I'm really in favour. He's been brilliant on Israel. But again, on this issue, I mean, say on Ukraine and on Greenland, I think it's just utterly bizarre. But I mean, do you think Europe's handled this well?
Europe has done the best it can when you're dealing with effectively a garden hose that's switched full on and thrown in the garden. Which way is it going to go? And the problem with him is if you look at it when you boil it down, we're actually dealing with someone who doesn't really know which way's up, and democracy is going to bring him down because of the midterms. So you've got Starmer is terrified of the local elections, and Trump knows the midterms are going to hang him, and that's where all his power goes.
We shall wait and see. Yeah, you won't have so much control in Congress. We'll get a lot of executive power in the president still. Then again, a president who doesn't worry about re-election can do an awful lot. Matt, thank you very much indeed. Sorry, Andrew, apologies. Matt is on the line in Cheshire. Matt, you want to talk about what's been going on closer to home, and of course, there's news that Andrew Gwynn, Labour MP, who was basically suspended from the party, is over some WhatsApp messages, in which one of the things he hoped that a pensioner who didn't vote Labour would die before the next election when they complained about the winter fuel help being cut. But Andrew Gwynn is going to basically relinquish his seat. There's going to be a by-election. Lots of talk that Andy Burnham, the Greater Manchester mayor, would be, king up north, will vie for that seat, try and get that nomination, and could then be in Parliament to basically stand against Keir Starmer. What do you make of all of that?
Hi, good afternoon, Julia. I'm not that far away from Denton, and
there's a constituency.
I know for a fact that Reform have been pounding the ground in that area for about 3 months. So this just proves how utterly delusional Labour are, that they think they can even win that seat. The beauty of it is we could take out Andy Burnham into the bargain as well, and Labour are so thick that they think we'll cancel the local elections because we know we're going to get annihilated, but we'll have a by-election, but we'll win that.
Yeah.
So the idea, there were also 11 of our local councillors implicated in the Trigger Me Timbers sort of.
This is the WhatsApp group that Andrew Gwynn was in. I mean, I'm rather of the view that people should be allowed to write what they want in private groups, and unless they're actually threatening violence, committing a crime. But it didn't look very good for an MP to be, a Labour MP of all people, to be saying. I mean, certainly, you hope a constituent dies. I mean, that is quite something. It tells us what's in the heart of the man, doesn't it?
Well, they've been hoisted by their own petard, haven't they, by the standards in public life that they promised, when they in fact have no standards at all.
Yeah.
Not only in the language, but in their governance. So watch this space. I hope this by-election comes, and bye-bye Andy Burnham and Andrew Gwynn.
Well, I think I'm right in thinking Andrew Burnham doesn't have to stand down as mayor of Manchester and if he gets a nomination, I believe. If someone could check that for us, that'd be great. But I think he can still be mayor of Manchester while he stands. He can't be both. I think they would rule he can't be an MP and a mayor at the same time if he was elected. But we shall see. Right now, we're going to take a quick break. Just before we do, after that, we're going to talk to Lord David Frost, who's now Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs, get his thoughts on all of this, including attempts to undermine Brexit once again. Going to talk about that extraordinary 65-strong migrant hunting team in the government that's going to track down 53,000 illegal migrants who are on the run across Britain. Well, good luck with that. I'm sure we're all very hopeful and confident that will happen. But first up, it is time now to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning a trip of a lifetime to San Francisco. Talk is giving away flights, a 3-night stay at the 4-star Intercontinental Hotel, and £2,500 spending money, plus tickets to the Super Bowl to top it all off. Listen to find out how you can enter.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate, or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close 22nd January 2026, 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus, UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talksport.com. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
You do not want to miss out on the trip of a lifetime. But very good at luck to you. Just to point out, just checked, no, Andy Burnham, Mayor of Manchester, cannot stand in a seat to be an MP in the by-election that's going to be upcoming in Andrew Gwyn's seat, and in this is Gorton and Denton in the northwest. He can't stand in that while he is still mayor of Greater Manchester. Oh, that's going to put the cat among the pigeons, isn't it? We're going to talk about that up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. 12:38 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Still with me is Jake Wallace-Simons, journalist and author, joined now in the studio by Lord David Frost. He was you're an independent peer, but you are now Director General of the Institute for Economic Affairs Free Market Think Tank. A very, very good afternoon to you. And of course, we're also going to speak to you with a little bit of your former chief Brexit negotiator hat on as well.
Yes.
Where do we start?
Yeah.
Where do we start, Lord Frost? We just had the breaking news about these local elections. 29 different councils are choosing, well, they've given the option of just quite out of the blue choosing not to have local elections on the 7th of May. Vast majority of them, of course, being Labour councils. This is, of course, because there's reorganisation of district and county councils. And apparently there's absolutely impossible ability for these bureaucrats to organise an election at the same time, and presumably to, fart and chew gum at the same time as well, as one president once famously put it. But what do you make of this decision? 29 local councils basically denying democracy to their voters.
Isn't it interesting that all the councillors who think they're going to lose are the ones who want to postpone the elections?
Funny that.
One's really got to be quite suspicious about this. I mean, I know democracy is a kind of irritating cost, and it does cost to run an election, there's no doubt, but nevertheless is quite fundamental to the way we do things. And I do think it's the first time I've seen, or I remember, this kind of casual postponing of elections for short-term kind of convenience reasons, and it's a really bad precedent.
But this is under a law which allows it in the event of wartime, and we didn't have general elections during the Second World War. We also had postponed local elections during COVID, which was never justifiable, given that the Americans managed to hold a whole US presidential election during the height of COVID. What's to stop the government doing this for a general election they think they might lose? And I don't think that's an exaggeration. No, I mean, as far as I can see, nothing other than kind of conventions and a feeling that we don't do that sort of thing here. It's secondary legislation, so quite easy to get through through Parliament. I mean, I don't think they are actually contemplating this, but it's interesting that so much of our constitution rests on we just don't do that kind of thing here. And we learned that during Brexit, didn't we? There were lots of things we thought, well, obviously, it's things like we'd had a referendum and in 2016, and there was a clear vote for us to leave the European Union, and then suddenly we had 3 years of people, including one Kay Starmer, who was then Shadow Brexit Secretary, telling us, no, it was just it was just an advisory. It wasn't legal. It wasn't, and we suddenly had people challenging the democratic vote, and I think a lot of us were just sort of befuddled, angry as well, and upset, but befuddled that people who claim to be Democrats really did not believe in democracy.
Yeah, one's really got to kind of feel that. I must say that, you know, their commitment is a bit thin. As I say, I don't think they're going to postpone a general election, but
it shouldn't be a matter of luck for us that they don't.
No.
It should be they can't.
Totally. And this is one of the reasons why they're so obsessed with concepts like disinformation, you know, because they realise voters are kind of vulnerable to bad ideas, and therefore that's why they don't take voters seriously, why they don't take results seriously, why they regard elections as a kind of second-order idea, because they think that the ordinary voter is a bit daft and a bit prone to be swayed by all these bad ideas and actors. And I just don't think that. I think the British people get things right.
The
mostly.
wisdom of crowds. I've always said, if you actually look back at all the elections, and whether you liked the victor or not at the time, in terms of the choices available, I think the British voter, the wisdom of crowds, make the right decision. And again, we, unlike other European countries, you know, we've not been ruled by fascist dictators, but you know, we've not been overrun and invaded in 1,000 years. But also, crucially, we don't elect hard left socialist governments. We don't elect hard far right governments. We really, really don't. We're a pretty moderate, you know, get on with it kind of country. So we haven't got a bad history on that.
No.
In terms of what's going on in terms of Brexit, as the former chief Brexit negotiator, not a week goes by without another story about how the government or a member of the government speaking out, and you know they've been given permission to do this, talking about, well, we should be back in the customs union, back in the singles market, we should roll this back, we should have this sort of, what's it called, dynamic alignment, where we just basically follow EU rules forever so that we won't have some trading wars. Do you think they genuinely are plotting to, by hook or by crook, without us really noticing, boil us as a frog, just from cold water almost, and take us back into the European Union, and our sovereignty will be dead before we actually realise it?
I mean, almost every day, every time there's an announcement on Brexit, we learn some new thing. This week, it's as you say, the noise about the customs union. Before Christmas, we suddenly discovered we were going to go back into the EU electricity market. That was a new thing. And I think, you know, much of the establishment isn't just Labour, you know, kind of secretly want to go back into the EU, I think. I don't think they can do it overnight.
I think many of the Tories.
But quite a few of them probably do. But I think they're taking opportunities, they're inching us in that direction, so we get used to the idea. And so this argument develops that, well, we're in so much, you know, maybe it would be better to be in this
and
other
then have
bit,
a say.
and so on and so forth.
We're paying, but we've got no say. We may as well be in, may as well be at the table.
That's right. And they're operating under this sort of fantasy delusion that, you know, Europe is this tremendously successful economic area and the only way of getting growth is to go back into the European Union. But you only have to look at the figures that, you know, this is not the case. Europe is the slowest growing part of the world. You know, we're growing at the same pace as France and Germany, and that is extremely slowly, and we should be looking out and getting ourselves out of the tangle.
And yet we're told constantly all of our problems come down to Brexit, but I'm not aware of Germany leaving the European Union.
Exactly.
Maybe they should.
Maybe they should.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about the economy, because, you know, you're the director of the Institute of Economic Affairs. Not going very well, despite that steely focus from the Prime Minister and the Chancellor on economic growth. We've got the Prime Minister not at Davos. But Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is. We've had just non-stop string of miserable, not devastating, but just miserable economic news when it comes to inflation and jobs and employment and the like. In particular in certain areas of the economy. And we've seen again and again and again, from lockdown onwards, devastation of our hospitality industry, which, of course, if all these people worked in one big factory, they'd all be bailed out, wouldn't they? But they don't work in one big factory in Sunderland. They work across the whole country. And yet we are talking about millions of jobs, billions of pounds worth of our economy, huge part of our tourism industry, again, a vital part of our services economy. And yet they're being hung out to dry.
That's right. I mean, there is a boom in one area, which is tax advice. And I wonder why that is. You know, it's all getting more and more complex and more difficult. Hospitality and pubs, I mean, the problem is everything's going in the wrong direction. They're pushing up taxes, they're pushing up spending, they're pushing up regulation. All these numbers are going to get worse. If that's what you're trying to do, you've got to raise the money from somewhere. That's why they went for pubs. That's why they're going for other bits of hospitality. And then it comes down to who can lobby most effectively. You know, it doesn't come down to, you know, how profitable you are, how effective you are, how good you are at supplying what people want. It comes down to, do you have the best line to the government?
Because this isn't a market economy in that sense. So it's being affected. Well, we're told there's going to be this help for pubs now, but not for cafes and hotels.
Exactly.
But But I mean, what about a hotel that's got a bar in it? Is that a pub? Could that count? I mean, but again, we're talking about people who were told they were going to be given help again and again, certainly at the last budget, and then they saw their business rates, double, treble. We spoke to a publican who started the whole ban your Labour MP from your pub, and he was talking about like an extra £40,000 on his business rates.
I mean, it's incredible that the Treasury didn't seem to realise what the effects of their measures was going to be. Really worrying. Now they're trying to correct it, but of course they've still got to raise the money. Somebody has got to pay. If it isn't pubs, if it isn't hotels.
But then none of them aren't going to be able to pay.
No,
because they're going to go under.
They're going to go under. That's what's going to happen. And that's why the economy is slowing.
Is this fundamentally an issue with an awful lot of people in our political world now? They simply, let's face it, they don't know what they're talking about. Now, I wouldn't assume to tell someone who runs a business how to run a business, because I've not set up and run my own business. It is extraordinary. We've got a government, people who've pretty much not been in the private sector at all. They don't understand profit incentive. They don't understand how, why putting up the cost, for instance, of national insurance for employers would increase the cost of employing someone who might mean you'd employ fewer people or sack people. They just don't get some really basic stuff.
No, they really don't. And I've run a small business in terms of a trade association, special kind. I'm now running the IA, and I can tell you the amount of time that is taken up with paperwork, compliance, employment law, all the things that stop you doing what you're there to do. OK, we're non-profit making, but lots of others are trying to make money out of this.
They're trying to pay their mortgage out of it.
They're doing things that do not contribute in a single way to making money and being profitable and giving people what they want. And while that's the case, the economy is going downhill.
Are you possible? I know you're an independent peer now. Is there any possibility you might be one of the people considering a move to reform? You were appointed as a Conservative peer by Boris Johnson.
As long as I'm at the IEA, I'm independent and non-affiliated. Let's see how the world develops in the next few years. Like I think everybody on the right of the Conservative Party, we talk to all sorts of people, and we all think the same kind of thing.
That's the sound of a door being wedged open. David Frost, thank you so much. Just one moment. Jake Wallace-Simon's listening to all of that. Just your thoughts either on the Brexit or business, whichever.
Well, I mean, like we were saying earlier, it's a contempt for democracy that the government is showing, and that's as clear in the local elections as it is with their strategy towards getting us back in as close as they can towards the European Union. Yep. And the customs union in itself would be a terrible idea, because there's only disadvantages for us in joining the customs union. It's not a free trade area. Yep. Most of our trade goes on outside of Europe. What's the point in giving the EU control over the terms and the tariffs for the rest of the world when we mainly trade with the rest of the world? As Dan Hannan wrote in a recent column, it wouldn't be like throwing away the burger and eating the napkin. It would be throwing away the burger and eating your wallet.
Wonderful line, as always, from Dan Hannan. Big thanks, Jake Wallace-Simon. We'll come back to you in just a couple of moments. Big thanks to Lord Frost joining us in the studio. Up next, going to talk about how 65 strong civil servants are apparently tracking down some 53,000 illegal migrants who've either entered here illegally, gone on the run, or foreign criminals who should have already been deported. Do you fancy their chances of finding them? We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
Well, I see somebody who has changed his tune throughout time to suit his purpose, who is personally very, very ambitious, and I'm afraid what he's been saying, certainly at the time of his defection, does not fit with what he was saying when he was within the Conservative fold. You know, this is somebody, Jeremy, who was quite happy to sit at the shadow cabinet table nodding away with others and so on, but as soon as the moment arrived, suddenly he changed his tune, and I think people will draw their own conclusions on that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:51 is the time. I'm still here. So is Jake Wallace-Simon's going to be joined by Ian Collins in just a couple of moments to tell us what's happening on his show right now. Let's talk about this new 65-strong unit that is going to be a migrant hunting unit. They're going to be tasked with tracking down 53,000 illegal migrants who are currently on the run across Britain. I don't think they're going to do it either, but let's talk to Robert Bates. He's Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Robert, thank you for joining us. Who are these people, and who are the people who are going to be doing the tracking down, and who are the people they're trying to track down?
So the people that are going to be doing the tracking in this new sort of high-sounding unit are actually individuals that have just been reshuffled from elsewhere within immigration enforcement. They're not new recruits with specialist skills. They're individuals that have been doing this job for a while anyway.
Individuals who've been doing a very bad job of the job they've already had for a while.
Well, they've been doing a very bad job, but they've also been working in a very bad, underfunded, understaffed organisation. You know, people think of immigration enforcement, they probably think of America, ICE, you know, kind of guns blazing, no holds barred. We have a tiny, emaciated unit trying to actually work on this. The people they're trying to track are people that the government almost actually had grips of. They sort of had them in their purview, and we're trying to remove them. But as we've discussed previously on your show, the inability actually, even if an individual's in detention facilities, to be removed because of their rights to human rights appeals and judicial review, deportation, they've got put on immigration bail. So the government said to them, no, don't you go running off, because we'll be keeping an eye on you. And clearly this is the result of what happens. These individuals then just go, oh, well, I don't actually think you're going to be able to do anything, and have just disappeared.
I mean, one of them probably delivered one of my audience members a Deliveroo meal last night. They're around somewhere.
Well, quite right, but I think that actually this is only the tip of the iceberg of how many people are just disappearing from the Home Office. You've got these people that were on immigration bail. You've also got about 20,000 foreign national offenders who did time in prison, and the government says we do plan to deport you, but the Home Office now doesn't have data on where they are, doesn't know which communities they're in.
I mean, did anyone think of tagging these people? I mean, again, I think most of us thought that if you committed an offence in this country, you're in prison, and then they literally took you from the prison to the airport and kicked you up the stairs of the plane and said, ta-ra then. But no.
No, it's almost just sort of blind trust that these individuals that have either come into the country illegally, are in the country illegally, or have committed horrible crimes are somehow going to be really obliging to sort of what's requested of them to sort of stay in contact. And then, of course, we've also got, you know, tens of thousands, 50 or so thousand individuals that have claimed asylum in the country, having come in illegally. And then the Home Office, rather than putting them in detention facilities, has put them in hotels, and they've disappeared as well. So,
which I'm surprised by, because they got the free hotel and the food. But by the way, that doesn't even include the 1 million plus people who've arrived in this country, many of them legally, with a student visa, a tourist visa, or a work visa, and have just stayed. And despite all those faffing we do and standing around in queues when we go in and out of the country with our passport and everything being checked, turns out the government doesn't keep a record of anyone coming in or coming out, and if they do, they don't bother checking it. They've got no idea who's here, who isn't here, and who's got a right to be here.
Not a scuba, and they don't even know where to begin trying to calculate actually the scale of this problem. The data is in such a mess that the system for counting people out and working out if someone had left the country used to just be a bloke stood at airports with a clipboard asking questions. I think basically what we've seen here is the competence of the British state in its finest form, really, and the solution as well is another indication of actually, I think unfortunately, just how unserious the British establishment is about clamping down on this issue. So if we were to have a serious government in 2029 that was committed to removing all illegal migrants and foreign criminals, they basically got to start again. They've got to really recognise that the sort of the minnows currently operating in this area, immigration enforcement, which has a budget that's less than sort of a lot of local councils, basically you've got to go on a huge recruitment drive, because we've really got to uprate the number of individuals working on this, and we've actually got to properly equip them and remove those legal barriers that are not just a timely cost, but also a huge fiscal cost of having to constantly deal with appeals and reappeals and challenges.
But and also deal with the criminality. I mean, these people are illegally here. They are criminals. They have no right to be here. Again, I don't understand when it was an issue with what Trump's doing with ICE and the people who are protesting. They're going around to round up people who've been told, you're not here legally, you need to go. I am utterly flabbergasted by all the people who seem to think that anyone who fancies it, you can hide out for long enough, has a right to live and stay in our country, and often, getting council housing and, free education, free healthcare and the like. I find it utterly bewildering that people think this and think that getting those people out of the country is in some way a far right view. I would think it was a moderate mainstream view until about 10 years ago for everyone in the country. I mean, do you think that there's just no will to do it? So they don't really bother, that it's the lanyard classes, they're not really bothered, or do you think they want to do it? They're just a bit useless.
I imagine the immigration enforcement officers are quite keen to actually try and have some professional success and start rounding individuals up. I think for the government, I mean, and clearly the fact they've only directed 65 or so staff towards addressing this current issue, it's purely gestrative. They know that these kind of news stories will come out and they'll have a bad news cycle. But I don't think actually in their heart of hearts they even think that it's possible to do it. I think too many politicians in particular, and especially in the Conservative Party, just kind of give up and they're almost just chewed up and so cynical about actually even trying to make this country a better place. And this is why actually I think we need to see something completely different in our approach to the country in a whole, but especially immigration, and just to say, no, it's time for a bit of radicalism. Let's actually start doing things.
Absolutely. Enforcing the law. Mad idea. Might catch on. Robert Bates, great to talk to you as always, Research Director of the Centre for Migration Control. But Jake Wallace-Simon's listening to this. Again, this is all very far right, isn't it, having this conversation? This is really basic stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it just goes to show where the government's priorities are more than anything else. It's put loads of money into welfare, raising taxes in order to do so in the last budget. Some of that money could have been usefully spent on tracking down these 50-odd thousand illegal migrants. I can't believe they're masters of the criminal underworld and are impossible to find. Exactly. I mean, it can't be that difficult with the right resources. Most of them are standing at my local supermarket. The thing is, the government's got more enthusiasm for arresting people for social media posts, for recognising a state of Palestine, for scrapping jury trials, for legalising euthanasia and full-term abortions, and for paying people to live and do nothing than enforcing the law.
You know what the solution is? Digital ID cards. It always is.
Changing the government, I thought you were going to say.
No. It's always digital ID cards. Can I just say, Ian Collins is here right now. Tell us what's happening on his show.
I'd like to meet the